An hour after her birth, the main heroine suddenly recalled her past life. It so happened that she ended up in a novel she had read on her friend's recommendation, a novel with an absolutely happy ending. In the first part, the main heroine overcomes the villainess and marries the main hero. The villainess, who tormented the main heroine, meets her death in the end. Meanwhile, the main hero fathers a daughter and a son, and they lived happily ever after for a long time. At that very moment, the main heroine's mother was locked in a tower and was the main villainess. She constantly cried and asked the Duke where he was, wondering if he had forgotten about her. It turned out that the main heroine was reborn not as the daughter of the main heroes, but as the daughter of the villainess. As ironic as it may be, there was a great contradiction in the novel's happy ending. After all, in reality, the villainess was the wife of the main hero. They had been married for 3 years and had a wonderful relationship. But as soon as the main heroine entered the estate as a maid, the main hero fell in love with her and began an affair, starting a secret intrigue. At that time, his wife accidentally overheard the maid confessing her love to Eunice. She was shocked and thought, could the Duke really have done this? It seemed simply impossible. The betrayed villainess desperately tried to preserve her husband's love and her status as a duchess. But alas, the novel favored the main heroine. The main hero then mistook all his wife's efforts for villainy. As a result, he locked the villainess in a tower with a spire. However, she wasn't alone at that time, for a girl the fruit of her love with the main hero is already growing in her womb. One day, the girl woke up and saw her mother standing by the window, crying again. All this time, she sobbed and called out to the Duke. The heroine wondered, why does she keep crying like this? This very villainess from the novel, who was her mother, wailed all day long only for her former husband. She only occasionally paid attention to the girl, and even then, just during feeding times. The girl lay there, wondering what was so great about a man who abandoned this woman. Then she pondered whether she was now destined to spend her whole life here because she was the daughter of the villainess, or what. She thought, as if by some cruel twist, even after being reborn, she ended up in a second-rate novel. She wondered if she could handle all of this at all. Her worries were pointless, and life raced forward like an arrow let loose. When the girl learned to walk on her own, she parted ways with her mother. But even at that very moment of their parting, the woman continued shedding tears for the Duke. It so happened that until her very last moment, she cried for the Duke, not for her own daughter. Then she ended up in an imperial orphanage, but things there were far from smooth. From that moment, such difficult days began that the girl started missing her life in the tower with the spire. On the first day, the matron asked if this was really the villainous daughter, suggesting she must be just as wicked as her mother. A man sitting nearby said it irritated him too. He wondered if they should let her go hungry for a bit. He was curious if she'd die if she didn't eat for a while. Then he laughed and said, wouldn't the duchy be better off if she died? The girl listened to all this and thought that at least her mother had cared enough to ensure she was always fed. If she didn't have memories from her past life, she'd probably cry every day. Time passed, and she reached the age of 6. That day, the overseer asked if she was staring at her. She said the girl was practically a copy of her mother, which explained her wild malice. The girl immediately apologized to her. At the same time, she thought their sharp words were worse than being ignored or treated coldly. She just didn't want to get used to any of this. It so happened that the head of the orphanage witnessed a similar scene that very day. But he simply said, what difference does it make, as long as the information doesn't leak anywhere? It turned out that with the quiet permission of the orphanage director, they lost their last scraps of conscience. And just as the heroine was starting to get used to this rotten story and rotten fate in the orphanage, a new face appeared. It was a beautiful girl with a pleasant and approachable appearance. When she arrived, she announced to everyone that she hoped they'd get along. Unlike the others, she welcomed the girl with immense warmth. In the moments when the girl was hurt, she tended to her. She also secretly gave her food and treated her gently, stroking her as if she were her own child. She always said the girl was very beautiful. At that moment, the girl thought, not everyone in the orphanage could be crazy. She also prayed that this peace would last as long as possible. But what kind of peace could the daughter of a villainess dream of? One day, Night seized her and took her to the tower where her mother was imprisoned. The girl asked them, why are they suddenly taking her back to the tower? One of them, with a smug smile, remarked, shouldn't she be by her mother's side in her final moments? After all, it's their last gesture of goodwill. The heroine thought, are they pretending this is all for her sake? At the same time, she thought, we're not even needed by this woman who only pines for her husband. And yet, her mother breastfed her when the girl cried. Her embraces in those moments were so warm that she forgot about hunger and her bleak future. Then the heroine decided she'd remember it well, so she could recall her any time she missed her. A moment later, they brought the girl into that very tower and told her to say her final goodbye. What the main heroine saw shocked her. Her mother lay on the bed, completely emaciated. The heroine thought she was thin before, but not this much. But even in such a critical state, she kept calling out to the Duke. The girl thought, it's hard for her even to breathe, yet she still calls for her love. Then she thought it was all rather strange. All this time, she calmly endured it, even when they beat or insulted her. But the thought that her mother remained indifferent to her until the very end tore her heart apart. The girl stood there, tears welling up in her eyes. She thought, her Duke, her love, this man had forgotten about them anyway and was now living happily. But she couldn't understand why her mother still couldn't see that. Yet, in one moment, she realized she could understand the sorrow of someone who remained indifferent to her. After all, it turned out things were the same for the heroine. Then she turned to her mother and said her name was Daphne. It so happened that since no one had given her a name, she named herself. She asked the woman, isn't it a beautiful name? Then her mother looked into her eyes, which the girl had inherited from her father, and the next moment she began longing for her former husband again. With tears in her eyes, the girl said she understood her after all, because she didn't want to be her mother, just the Duke's wife. She added that she'd never forget her, so the woman could stop suffering and fall into a deep, deep sleep. She didn't need to wait for the father, for he wouldn't come, and she begged her to rest in peace. Hearing these words, the woman agreed, and her last strength began to leave her. A few moments later, her final breath ceased. The girl saw this and immediately called out to her, but she, in turn, no longer responded to her words or actions. Seeing this, a knight covered the woman's body with a white cloth. The main heroine said goodbye to her mother. Then the knight grabbed the main heroine and told her it was time to go back, but the heroine thought she hadn't yet managed to fully imprint her mother in her memory. Though it was a horrific sight, it was the last time. After all, she'd never see her again. The girl kept trying to break free, but the guy wouldn't let her go and said they needed to leave quickly, telling her not to fuss. Suddenly, she turned to him and asked the knight uncle what would happen to her mother now. He, in turn, didn't expect such a strange question and froze, unsure how to answer. The heroine thought he probably didn't expect her to ask something like that. After all, to him, this girl was just a 7-year-old child who didn't even fully understand death. After a brief pause, the same guy smiled and said her mother would now pay for it. The next place she'd go to would be hell. She asked what it meant that she'd pay for it. He turned around and led the girl in another direction. He told her not to do bad deeds and to live with a clear conscience, otherwise she'd repeat her mother's fate. The heroine thought, what nonsense is he spouting? After all, the bad deed was originally committed by the main heroine and the main hero, who abandoned her mother, his lawful wife, and started cheating on her. Now she wondered what her mother had done wrong to deserve such a pitiful end in this hell. And why should she now endure such treatment? The sharp glares of people, which the girl still felt on herself today, all those spiteful, judgmental looks. It was absolutely obvious that no one here would pity the daughter who had just lost her mother. The heroine knew that now her mother's story would be remembered as that of a villainess, and she, her daughter, would also have to prepare to face tragedy. It was foretold not just the villainess' death, but her daughter's too. According to the novel's plot, after the villainess' death, the heroine would be beaten to death by a mob the very next day. The girl wondered, would all this really happen just because she was the villainess' daughter? After all, it seemed utterly ridiculous and absurd. The knight leading her told her not to dawdle, as there were still people behind her who needed to move. Then he grabbed the girl and threw her to the ground. At that moment, silhouettes of people appeared above her, looking down at her with condemnation. They said she was the same child, the daughter of a monster. Hearing all these words, the heroine was quite angry and thought that to her, they were the real monsters. Suddenly, a girl heard someone call her by name, Daphne. She immediately turned her head to see who it was, and it was her mentor from the orphanage. The heroine looked at her mentor, Elaine, with surprise. The girl immediately asked the little one if she was okay. Then she turned to everyone and said that the child had fallen like that, so why were they just standing there watching? She continued, saying the child was completely broken and needed to return to the orphanage quickly to be treated. The heroine paused for a moment to think about the girl's words. It made sense as she still had to live in the orphanage, so she wondered how she'd end up dying from a beating then. Her death was described in the novel in a single line, but not a word was written about who would beat her or how. All these thoughts began swirling constantly in the girl's head. Elaine added that they needed to head to the orphanage urgently, but first, they had to meet someone. The heroine grew curious and asked who they needed to meet. Her companion added that they really did need to see someone. And so, a man appeared before them. The little girl wondered who he was. The man, in turn, asked the knights what this child was doing there in front of him. Daphne looked at this man and thought he had an imposing build and blue-black hair like the night sky. He also had a sharp gaze and a well-defined jawline. His eyes shone with the same gold she'd seen in the mirror. Now she realized she knew him. He was her real father. The girl stood before him, looking up. Then she leaned forward and wondered why he was here, and it certainly wasn't out of love for her. Her hands started trembling, and she thought this was her only lifeline for survival right now. After all, if she just disappeared, anything could happen tomorrow. The mentor immediately approached the girl and said this was his daughter. The man asked, "Really, his daughter?" The same guy who had taken the girl to her mother said she was the daughter of the Villainess friar. The main heroine realized she could almost physically feel the contempt in her real father's gaze when he heard those words. Then she thought, either way, if she missed this chance, she'd die tomorrow no matter what, but she didn't want that at all. After that, she immediately smiled and reached out her hands to her father, wanting to approach him. Seeing this, the man immediately turned away and walked in the other direction, saying this wasn't his child. At the same time, he thought she had the same violet hair color, but he kept saying it was simply impossible. The woman who hired people to harm Eunice didn't have money. She must have just paid one of them with her body. He added that they shouldn't dare carelessly attribute kinship to him, especially with such a filthy child, whose veins carried who knows whose blood. Then other strangers approached the Duke, along with the heroine's mother's body. They turned to him and said this woman was definitely dead, showing it to him. The man remarked that they should dispose of the corpse themselves, and they immediately agreed. The main heroine thought that even his last visit was only to confirm her death. But it was all rather sad after all. She had been his wife. She thought it was too much, this tragic end of the Villainess defeated in the novel, right up to her very last second. After that, the girl returned to that awful orphanage with her mentor. When they arrived at the orphanage, Elaine immediately let go of the girl's hand. Then she said it was some kind of nightmare. She had held on to her, thinking she was a golden thread that would help her life flourish. But that little girl turned out to be just a rotten thread. She added that she had simply planned to follow her and live comfortably as the Duke's nanny. The main heroine was shocked by these words and thought, so that's why she'd been so kind to her all this time. Then the mentor leaned down to her and said it all irritated her so much, asking what she should do in this situation. The girl immediately thought this definitely wasn't the Elaine she'd known all this time. Suddenly, the other children from the orphanage appeared behind her, laughing loudly. One of the girls asked if her mother had really died. Then, with a smug smile, she added that everyone was saying it was just some kind of relief. After all, her mother was just a horrible person. The main heroine immediately turned to her, furious at hearing this. At the same time, she thought it irritated her so much, but she couldn't do anything about it right now. So she decided it'd be better to just ignore it all, as usual, and turned away. but that nasty little girl kept asking where she was going and wondered if it was true. And so, did her father kill her mother? The main heroine turned around again and asked what she'd just said. A boy standing nearby said her father locked her mother in the tower, didn't he? Another girl nearby added that it was true he locked her up until her death. The children kept laughing loudly and saying her father really abandoned her mother. It turned out he hated her so much that he left her, and since she was bad, he killed her. Then they added that it meant she was really bad too, and she had no one to inherit kindness from. This upset the heroine greatly, and she thought that she and her mother weren't bad at all. It wasn't like that, but she couldn't lash out or get angry at them right now. But then she paused for a second and wondered why she couldn't. After all, they weren't the first to insult her mother and slander her. Still, she understood it wasn't worth doing all this after all. They were just little kids who didn't even realize what they were doing. If she explained it to them properly, maybe they'd understand something. Suddenly, that same nasty little girl approached her and said it was a very pleasant sight. The heroine wondered what she meant by a pleasant sight. She wasn't acting this way because she was little and didn't understand it was obvious malice. It turned out she hated her just because she was the Villainess daughter. Then the girl just laughed out loud. At the same time, she thought, since when had it become normal for even children to bully her? Then she told all of them that she was still better than them. The girl who approached her asked what nonsense she was spouting. The heroine kept talking, saying she became an orphan because her mother died. But with them, it was a completely different story. At these words, the other children were shocked. Daphne added that they were orphans just like her, so why were they taking their anger out on her? She wondered. She noted that people should treat others the way they want to be treated in return. She thought she didn't even want to argue with kids like these. It'd be better to ignore them and go to her room. After all, she didn't know how she'd die, and it was better to be cautious with other people. Suddenly, someone stopped the girl by grabbing her arm. It turned out to be her mentor, Elaine. The girl remarked that those were some harsh words toward her friends. Then she shouted, where had she even learned such rudeness? The girl thought that until this very moment, she'd just silently watched all this. The other children were happy to hear the mentor yelling at the main heroine. The girl kept saying it was unbelievable, and she was like a copy of her mother. The heroine noted that she didn't mean it that way. Elaine said she'd had enough of her words, since she didn't even regret her actions. Then she told Daphne to go to her room and think about her behavior there. After that, it all happened, and the heroine went to her room. She thought she now truly realized she'd become an orphan for real. Her mother died because she was a villainess. The Duke didn't consider her his child. Approaching the bed, she immediately started crying. Then she thought that, either way, everything was predetermined, so she thought she'd be fine with it, but apparently, she was wrong. Bitter feelings were tearing her apart at that moment. Since the main villainess had died, the next step in the script was her own death. People who despised her because of her mother, and the orphanage children acting out of pure malice, now openly mocking workers and an indifferent director who ignored everything. She wondered whose hands she'd die by. Continuing to sob, she thought she didn't want to die in any way. She wanted to live. After all, her mother wouldn't want her to die like this either. Then the girl fell asleep and woke up only after some time. Sitting up immediately, she wondered how much time had passed and if it was already evening. Suddenly, she heard footsteps and realized someone was approaching her room. A moment later, the door to her room swung open. 3 caretakers entered, with rather strange smiles on their faces. Elaine asked if the girl had thought about her behavior. Then she added that she'd really spoiled her too much. According to the elders, a child without proper upbringing needed to be punished accordingly. Then she sat closer to the girl, and these actions frightened her. She added that, judging by everything, she still hadn't thought anything over, and that wouldn't do. She noted that tomorrow, she'd have to go somewhere with her. It turned out that even she'd learn her lesson after visiting a place full of people would teach her a good lesson. After these words, she left the room and slammed the door. This girl was told to barricade the entrance so the little one couldn't leave. She did just that, setting up some barricades at the front door. The heroine kept sitting in the room, feeling very scared. She thought about the words she'd said about taking her somewhere. Apparently, that's where she'd die. It seemed, if she couldn't escape this room tonight, she'd most likely die. The girl went and opened the bag provided by the orphanage from the state. She noticed a few sets of clothes and worn-out shoes inside, also 2 hair ties. It was sad that there was really nothing that belonged to her. The girl thought she had no reason to have anything anyway. Then she wondered why she'd only tried to accept all this unquestioningly until now. But she realized that wasn't true after all. If she'd run away back then, she wouldn't have been able to see her mother's end. The villainous mother died, and as soon as the girl, the villainous daughter, died too, the story would gradually shift to a tale of the happy upbringing of the main hero's cute daughter from the first part of the book. This story would be about how she pulls off an escapade, running away from home to travel to a neighboring kingdom. She'd also meet dear friends there. After that, she'd meet the love of her life and then live happily ever after with him. It'd be a happy ending, but then the death of the main heroine's mother and her own death would be akin to a completely natural retribution. But the heroine wondered why the people who sinned from the start should be happy. Was it because they were the main heroes? Smiling, she realized she didn't want to just watch all this happen. Even if she didn't shake the plot too much or maybe shook it a lot, the story should follow the same path, or would it? That interested the girl. It turned out that if everything went this way, it'd be fate, but if it changed, it'd be for her benefit. After all, she didn't want to suffer pointlessly like her mother had before her. After that, she realized she had to act right now. She took a piece of fabric and placed it under her foot. Then she tied it up and said it was still throbbing from her recent fall, so she'd bandage it anyway. Then she approached her bed and started dragging it to the other side of the room. After a few moments, she finally managed to do it. After that, she went to the spot where the bed had been and saw that she'd found what she was looking for. It turned out there was a hidden passage leading to the storage room. Unlike the other children, she alone lived in a room used as a storage space. This all happened because they'd said she might cause a commotion if she lived with the other kids. It turned out this was how they justified it, but they just wanted to isolate her from everyone. The girl noted that now this room would serve her well. If she opened this door connected to the main storage, she could escape outside right away. Then the main heroine covered that very door and said it blended perfectly with the wall, so they shouldn't notice it. Then she sat on the bed and thought it was time to turn the plot of the second part upside down. It turned out she had information that could come in handy. After the death of the villainess and her daughter, the still young main hero of the second part finds the head of a trading group and tries to kill her. But in the end, his plan fails, and is immediately captured. Impressed by his warrior-like demeanor, the head of the trading group makes him her heir. Then, as the head, the hero meets the heroine. Together, they go through many adventures and hardships, and a happy story begins. The girl wondered, so to start, the main hero mustn't meet the heroine. Wherever they might meet, there was a risk it'd lead to their happy ending. By changing the story so they wouldn't meet if possible, the heroine needed to find something to protect herself with. There was only one way, though she was the villainous daughter. If she proved her worth, even temporary protection could be granted by just one person. She thought of the woman who'd become the adoptive mother of the main hero in the second part. This person was called Chloe Benedetto. There was another reason she took the main hero as her adoptive son. That reason lay in her desire to freely use the main hero for her revenge. She once lived in the same orphanage as the main heroine did now. It turned out she was later sold into the underworld by the orphanage director, whom she considered her friend. Having overcome the hardships that befell her and risen to the head of the Benedetto trading group, she devised a plan to take revenge on the people from the orphanage and those behind it. According to the novel, the orphanage director wasn't very cautious. That's why he kept documents tied to the underworld in a drawer at his desk. Later, to find these documents, the main heroes secretly infiltrate the orphanage. The heroine thought that as soon as everyone fell asleep tonight, she'd steal those documents and then leave the orphanage. After all, she needed to strike a deal with the head of the trading group. She had to manage all this by morning at the latest. Late at night, in the silence, the sound of bells rang out. The main heroine immediately woke up and, sitting up, realized the bells had struck midnight. She wrapped her hands and feet in torn clothes beforehand to avoid making noise in the night's silence. After that, she decided it was time to head to the director's office. As she left the room, she looked around and, fortunately, saw no one patrolling. A few minutes later, she finally reached the entrance to the director's office. Looking at the door, she thought at least it wasn't locked. She approached the door, and luckily, it wasn't locked. Very quietly and carefully, the girl opened the door and closed it just as quietly. Then she turned her head into the room and was horrified by what she saw. It was all because the walls of this office were hung with expensive paintings and emeralds. The heroine wondered what this was all about and what these luxury items were. Then she went deeper into the room, examining every detail. She wondered if the director, besides state funds, was also taking dirty money. She thought, has he imagined himself some kind of dandy? But after a couple of minutes, she decided she had no time to insult the director now. She needed to find the documents quickly before anyone came in. She immediately opened the first drawer in the desk, but there was nothing there. Then she tried to open the second drawer, but there was nothing there either, just some useless papers. As a result, the heroine realized that only the third drawer remained. She immediately tried to open it, but it wouldn't budge. She wondered why it wouldn't open. Suddenly, she noticed a keyhole and realized that opening this drawer would require a key. After that, panic washed over her. She thought she hadn't expected a problem at this stage. Now the girl didn't know what to do in this situation. The main hero was incredibly strong, so he could have easily broken it open, but she didn't have the strength for that. Then she jumped up and decided she needed to think calmly. It turned out the director wasn't a fussy man, so who knows, he might have hidden the key wherever he pleased. After all, he was extremely lazy, so it definitely wasn't the file cabinet in the room. That meant she needed to find the most convenient spot for him. After thinking a bit, she realized the flower pot next to the desk was exactly that spot. She immediately went there and saw there were 2 pots. Then she remembered the director was left-handed. Because of that, she concluded she'd check the left flower first. She did so and wasn't wrong, the key was right there. Seeing the key, the main heroine was overjoyed, as her plan was finally starting to come together. After that, she went and easily opened that very third drawer. But she ran into a problem. She pulled out the documents, but she couldn't read and therefore didn't understand anything in them. This was only because she hadn't properly studied the writing of this world. Still, she decided this was enough to have materials for a deal. She looked into that drawer again and was surprised to see a seal lying there, looking rather unusual. Taking it in her hands, she thought it was stored in a place like this. It must be something important. She decided it'd be better to take it just in case and stuffed it into her bag. At that very moment, the girl heard footsteps approaching. She realized they were getting closer and closer and thought, could it be the director? The main heroine immediately got scared. After all, if the hot-tempered director found out she was trying to escape with these documents, he might just kill her. At the same time, she wondered what to do in this situation, since her weak little body wouldn't survive a jump from the second-floor height. After brief reflection, the girl found a very interesting hiding spot and realized it should work for her to hide. She immediately headed there. A few moments later, the director indeed entered the room with the mantle line. He asked the girl, so tomorrow he'd take Daphne there. She remarked that it was true, since she was so insolent. It turned out she needed a little punishment. The man asked, what if they recognized her by her hair there and beat her to death, what then? The girl smiled and said, wouldn't he be fine with her dying then? But he kept talking, saying she could do as she pleased. After all, they'd completely given up on this little girl anyway. The main heroine was hiding in a secluded spot at that moment, trying not to make a sound. Suddenly, the man stopped and said they needed to wait a second. The heroine tensed up at these words. He told the girl to look and asked what it was. Daphne thought, has she been caught? Is this the end? The director just sat on the couch under which the girl was hiding. Then he touched his subordinate's hair and said some beauty had stuck to her. After that, he started kissing her. The girl asked what he was up to. He kept kissing her and said they spent so little time together and needed to make up for it. Hearing this, the heroine was very surprised and thought, do they really have that kind of relationship? Elaine told him to wait, saying she didn't want to do it there. It was dark and cold. It was his office, after all. The director asked since when she'd become so picky. The girl noted that for now, she wanted to go to a warm room with a bed and invited him to go home. The man remarked that she herself had said she didn't want to talk about work at home too. After some time, he finally said he'd agree with her, and they needed to go home. After that, they left the office and slammed the door behind them. The main heroine realized those two had finally left and crawled out from under the couch. At the same time, she thought, are they really gone? She thought she was irreversibly caught by them. To be sure, she ran to the window and noticed them leaving. She thought this wasn't the time for all this. She needed to get out of there quickly. Then she continued her journey to escape the orphanage. At the same time, she prayed she wouldn't run into anyone on the way. Suddenly, she looked down and noticed a glowing lamp. She wondered what a lamp was doing there. The heroine knew oil lamps were supposed to be stored in the storage room. Suddenly, she stopped and thought, so they're oil lamps. If that's the case, she couldn't just leave. The girl suddenly smiled and realized her plan had slightly changed. She went to her room and decided to leave the clothes on the bed as if they were a pile. She thought it'd be good if that was enough to trick them. It needed to go unnoticed that she'd started the fire and that she'd disappeared in general. If they got scared that the public would find out about her death in the orphanage due to how they treated her and tried to cover her tracks, her plan would be simply perfect. Then she reasoned that the preparations were finally complete, and it was time to say goodbye to this place. A new life was beginning, and the girl would definitely survive, as well as change the start of the new story and turn everything into chaos. After that, she ran away and decided she wouldn't quietly wait for her death. In the storage room, she found those very oil lamps. She said they were there, and there were a lot of them, but they hadn't put a single one in her room. Then the girl took one of the lamps and threw it on the floor. It shattered into pieces right away. The heroine thought she'd show everyone that protecting them was pointless. The fire from that amount of oil would be enough to turn bones to ash. That meant no one would suspect anything, even if her body disappeared. After that, the girl approached the cold door and locked it. She thought she now needed to create the appearance that she couldn't escape. After all, if she locked the door, they'd all think the girl had really died. Then the heroine took matches and lit one of them. After that, she raised it up and easily tossed it into the oil. She said, "Let it all burn brightly and go perfectly." A few moments later, she escaped the building. At the same time, she thought the villainess daughter had died. The fire started spreading very quickly, and the heroine thought the director should be held accountable for this fire. The children would suffer from the damage too. But the heroine understood she didn't feel any guilt about it. After all, they should all feel guilty. She thought, let them lament how tragic it was that she died because of them. And when they all forgot about her, the girl would return safe and sound and raise real chaos there, the same kind of chaos her life had been until now. The girl ran through the town streets, smiling as she went. She thought, what a relief that it was night and there was absolutely no one on the streets. According to the novel, it was definitely somewhere nearby, she thought. After some time, she stopped and realized she'd found the place. It was a secret passage of the Benedetta trading group. The main heroine understood this was just the beginning. Only clients who came for a secret order could pass through this door. So the girl needed to enter too, pretending to be such a client and using the secret password. Right then, she knocked on that spot. At the same time, she thought, if her memory didn't fail her, the password definitely had to be the one she remembered. Just a few moments later, the door swung open before the girl. She, in turn, was surprised and realized it had really opened. Then the girl stepped inside and saw that there was no one there. But she immediately thought it didn't seem like she'd made a mistake. Should she go further and check? Looking at the walls, she saw lanterns glowing, and it was quite bright. She wondered if she just kept going forward, would there even be anyone there? If everything was as she thought, then reaching her goal was just a little bit away. After reaching the end, she saw there was a staircase leading down. She decided she needed to go down. There was no other way visible, and should end up somewhere if she followed the light. After some time, she made it down and saw a blinding flash in her eyes. It was even much brighter down there than upstairs. When she'd just descended, there was a person there who was surprised, wondering what a little girl was doing there. The heroine thought, "Who is this? And this person has a rather gentle voice." He asked the girl what she was doing in this place. Suddenly, he stepped back and asked how she even knew about this place. The girl stepped back too and hesitated with an answer. Then she said she'd come to meet the head of the trading group. The guy was surprised. Did she really want to meet her? Then he turned around and remarked, did she think they'd let just anyone in to see such a person? The girl said she'd come to make a deal with her. Hearing this, he said he didn't know how she found out about this place and got in, but she'd better leave. But the heroine added that she wouldn't do that after all. She'd made it here with such difficulty. She remembered how she'd promised herself to survive and change this story, so she couldn't just give up like that. Right then, the main heroine took a deep breath and shouted loudly that she wanted to make a deal. So this person needed to let her meet the head of the trading group. Her outburst stunned the man. He told the girl to stop for a second, but she kept shouting, demanding they let her meet her. At that very moment, a woman approached and said she had excellent hearing. It was none other than the head of the trading group, and she asked what all the noise was about at such a late hour. The woman remarked that it was strange after all. It wasn't just one of her subordinates making the noise. The heroine shouted that she was down there and had come to make a deal with the head of the trading group. The woman looked at her and asked what kind of deal she meant. Then she called the girl a little one in tattered rags and asked what kind of deal she wanted to make with her. The heroine said she wanted them to take her into the trading group, and should give them something they really needed. Hearing this, the woman said she wasn't one for charity. The main heroine immediately handed her a stack of papers and said this was the payment. She noted that she'd heard the director say these documents mustn't fall into her hands. That's why she brought them. It turned out these documents were definitely something she'd need. She said her companion should read them quickly, and she thought if they were needed, she'd have to shelter her and provide her with housing, and also become the support she could use to change this story. The heroine stood there, praying everything would work out at that moment. Suddenly, after reading them, the woman started laughing. The girl watched her actions closely and got a little scared. The head of the trading group, with a smile on her face, said she didn't know how she'd overheard and stolen this, but did she really come just for that? The subordinate standing nearby was surprised by this woman's reaction. She, in turn, kept talking, saying any slum kid could pull off something like that. She added that no, even that wasn't true after all. Their hands and feet were nimbler than this girl's. The heroine asked what she was saying. She immediately thought, this can't be. The main heroine thought the main heroes of the second part of the novel definitely stole these documents secretly because the woman needed them. Now the girl didn't understand why she wasn't pleased with them. Now she stood there, frightened, and didn't know what to do in this situation. After some time, the woman said that now, looking at her, she noticed her unusual hair color. The heroine was surprised by this and wondered why she suddenly mentioned her hair color. Then the head added that she didn't know about the neighboring empire, but here, that hair color wasn't common at all, and no matter how she looked at it, it was clear at a glance that she was that woman's daughter. Then she turned around and said that for her, this deal was a loss. She handed the documents to her subordinate and noted that she wouldn't want her arrival to harm their business. So she wanted the girl to leave while she was still asking nicely. These words disappointed the heroine, and she clenched her fist. At the same time, she smiled and asked, if she left, where would she go? She noted that she had no home, no family. Did she even have a place to return to? With a smile on her face, she asked if the woman also wanted her to die. After all, she was the daughter of the most awful Villainess. Then she remarked, what should she do then? After that, she turned to the woman, who had stopped, and shouted that she wouldn't just die and would definitely survive. Suddenly, a subordinate turned to the head of the trading group and asked if she heard that there was noise outside now. The woman asked what was going on. They said it seemed a fire had broken out at the orphanage, and a pretty serious one at that. She said, "What's this all about? The children mustn't get hurt under any circumstances." Suddenly, the main heroine chimed in and told them not to worry about it. It turned out she was the one who started the fire in her room after all. They'd put her in a separate storage room. The woman asked what nonsense she was spouting. The girl kept talking, saying she'd even locked the door to fake her death. But if she went back there because of someone, she'd get into big trouble with severe consequences. At the very least, it could happen that she'd be beaten to death. The subordinate asked, would they really beat her to death? The main heroine continued, saying they told her they'd punish her severely in a place where only people who hated her mother were. It was called punishment, but in reality, it was obvious. The head of the trading group thought they were probably planning to take her to the slums. The girl noted that either way, they couldn't help her, could they? At the same time, she thought, as expected, she didn't have the power to change the original plot. After all, it seemed everyone wanted her dead, but she wouldn't let fate go this way. Even if not them, she'd find another way to save herself. Suddenly, the woman stopped her and told her to wait a moment. At the same time, she suggested they introduce themselves again. She noted that her name was Chloe Benedetto. The heroine was surprised and thought something had shifted in her favor. Then she turned to the woman and said her name was Daphne. Her companion noted that it was all good, but what exactly did the girl want? She, in turn, added that she just wanted to live. Hearing these words, the woman only smiled. Then she told Daphne that she was a person who valued etiquette. That meant she wanted at least a flower as a welcoming gift. The heroine asked what kind of flower could there be in this harsh winter after all. They don't bloom. The woman noted that since they don't bloom, they'd need to look for one. She added, did the girl really think she'd accept something easily obtainable as a greeting? Beyond the fortress gates, flowers sometimes bloomed even in this weather, but it was too dangerous at night. That was because wild animals or even monsters could roam at night. So because of all that, one could die an untimely death while searching. After that, the woman asked if, even after all her words, she'd still bring her a flower. Then she added that since it was turning out this way, it needed to be scarlet and preferably of an expensive variety. A subordinate exclaimed to his mistress that she was just a tiny child. The heroine heard all these words and thought it was probably a test to check her resolve. Right after that, she agreed and said that if she didn't care which flower it was, she'd search for as many as needed, and she'd bring her scarlet flowers by dawn. Some time later, a subordinate of the head approached the girl and asked, so she said her name was Daphne, right? Then he introduced himself and said his name was Lennox Benedetto. At the same time, he held a small pair of shoes specially for the girl. The heroine immediately swapped her old shoes for these new ones. The guy noted that they were a bit big for her, but still better than the ones she'd been wearing. The girl immediately thanked him for such a wonderful gift. He also took a warm cloak and put it on the girl. He added that it was cold out there, so she'd better wear this, otherwise she might catch a cold by accident. Then the head subordinate took the little girl by the hand and said the fortress gates weren't far. At the same time, he asked if they'd walk there hand in hand. The girl immediately agreed and thought he was kind-hearted, even without knowing her true identity. After that, Lennox told Daphne that beyond the fortress gates, it was really very dangerous. That's why, if she got scared and wanted to give up, she could stop and come back right away. But the girl very seriously said that then she wouldn't be able to find the flowers. The guy noted that it was because it was really dangerous outside. The girl added that it might be the opposite after all. It could be safer in the deserted mountains. That was because the people she'd met so far only did everything to torment her. That's why they might not inspire any awkward pity for her either. The subordinate listened carefully to the little girl walking beside him. At the same time, he couldn't even respond to the words she said and thought this child was quite wounded in her soul. Just a little while later, the guy and the girl arrived, and he said they were finally here. The main heroine immediately looked up and saw the fortress gates leading outside right in front of her. She carefully started examining the emptiness and darkness ahead. Then, together with the head subordinate, the main heroine moved through the forest. They only had an oil lamp in their hands to light the way. Suddenly, the guy told Daphne that it'd really be better to stop here, but the girl told him it wasn't so, and she didn't want that. After that, he said, a bit disappointed, that she could follow the visible path then. The girl said she understood and immediately darted off in that direction. The guy, in turn, wanted to stop her but gave up his attempts. The heroine kept going deeper and deeper. She thought she'd assumed this until now, but it was still more serious than she'd imagined. It was too dark and so quiet around her, as if the girl were alone in the whole world. It all scared her terribly, and she thought she could only hear her own footsteps. Suddenly, in the night's silence, the girl heard something growling. She immediately listened closely and thought, could it be a wolf? It'd be bad if she encountered a wolf in a place like this, she'd die right away. She realized this wasn't a good sign and decided she urgently needed to avoid it. Right away, she started running as fast as she could in the opposite direction from that spot. After running for a while, the girl's small, fragile leg gave out, and she tripped. Because of this, she fell hard to the ground. She felt her leg hurting badly, and tears welled up in her eyes because of it. The main thing at that moment was that, although she no longer heard the wolf, the darkness and silence were the same as in the tower, still suffocating her. Then the main heroine got up a little and thought she couldn't just keep sitting there. Looking at her leg, she thought it might be because of her previous injury. She wondered if this might be the end after all. Nothing was going her way. Tears started welling up even more in the girl's eyes, and she thought, could she really die here, where she came to survive? But suddenly, before her eyes, she noticed a purple butterfly fluttering by. Looking up, she immediately started watching it and thought, a purple butterfly, and in winter too. She was also very curious why it kept circling around her. It seemed to the heroine that it was waiting for her, and she thought, could it want to lead her somewhere? She immediately got up and followed the butterfly. At the same time, she said to wait a moment, and they'd go together. Then she started closely examining this creature and thought its color felt so familiar. It was as if it reminded her of something and was a bit darker than her hair. Suddenly, the heroine realized it was exactly like her mother's hair color. She was beautiful, like a butterfly cherished by a loved one. The main heroine's mother, a life that ended tragically in the tower with the spire. Then the girl grew very curious. Her mother, whom everyone called a villainess, had she gone to heaven? Suddenly, the butterfly started circling her even more intensely, and the girl immediately understood everything. She said she was coming and apologized for making it wait. Just a short while later, the girl froze, gazing at the full moon before her. Then she lowered her eyes and saw flowers growing there. But they were growing a bit up on a ledge, and the heroine thought it was pretty high for her. But if she was careful, she could still climb up. Then she gathered her courage and said she just needed to try. Then she started climbing little by little, and the ground under her foot crumbled. The girl noted that it seemed the ground wasn't very stable. Because of that, she'd need to be careful on the way down. After that, the girl very carelessly started climbing higher toward the coveted flowers. She told herself not to rush and to do it very quietly, step by step. Meanwhile, the butterfly that had guided her circled and watched her from the side. After a few minutes of struggling, the girl finally managed to almost reach those very flowers. She stretched out her hand, and she was just a tiny bit away from touching them. Still, it wasn't as easy as it might have seemed at first. The girl kept trying to reach them and thought she'd grab them any second now. Finally, after some time, she reached them and took hold of them. The heroine was overjoyed by this and thought of her mother and how she'd finally succeeded and found the flower. After all, she'd done something on her own that had seemed almost impossible to her. Then she thanked the beautiful butterfly, reminiscent of her mother, for leading her there. The girl thought all that was left was to climb down carefully when suddenly the ground under her foot started crumbling. It was that very injured leg she'd been leaning on, and it was clear it had weakened completely. The girl lost her focus and started sliding down little by little. Meanwhile, a subordinate of the trading group's head was wandering through the forest, shouting for Daphne, asking where she was. He was very worried about the girl and thought he shouldn't have let such a little girl go alone. Suddenly, the guy heard someone scream behind him. He immediately turned his attention toward the sound and noticed a girl's body falling headfirst off a cliff. Looking closer, the guy saw it was indeed the girl had been searching for all this time. She couldn't hold on to the ledge and was now falling headfirst straight to the ground. In that moment, as she fell, the girl thought her injured leg hurt so much, and her vision was gradually getting blurry. At the same time, she thought, could this be her end? But she didn't want to give up after all. She'd found this flower through such hardships, and it couldn't be that she'd almost reached the end. Then the girl thought of her mother. If she was watching all this, she begged her to help her in this situation. Sometime after that incident, the girl woke up. Trying to open her eyes, she realized it hurt to breathe. Also, her whole body ached terribly. The heroine clutched her throat and, looking around the room she was in, wondered where she even was. Suddenly, someone spoke to her and handed her a glass of water. He said it was warm water and told the girl to take it. The girl turned her gaze toward him and saw a stranger sitting in front of her. He smiled and asked if she'd finally woken up. Then he said her brother Lennox, specifically, had brought her here. The boy added that they'd given those very flowers to their mistress, so the girl didn't need to worry at all. Hearing this, the heroine was overjoyed. Then she turned to the boy and asked who he even was. He, in turn, noted that he hadn't even introduced himself and really should. Then the boy smiled even wider and said his name was Riccardo Benedetto. It turned out he'd been looking after the girl all this time. He added that she'd had a high fever for several days, and how great it was that she was finally getting better, though it'd take a bit more time for her legs to recover. The girl listened carefully to the boy and then said she couldn't even move them. At the same time, she asked, would she really never walk again? But Riccardo immediately said nothing like that would happen. After that, he rushed to the girl and grabbed her hands. He said it wasn't a serious injury at all, and had definitely heal her and get her back on her feet. Then he smiled again and said that from now on, he was her older brother. This surprised the heroine greatly, and she wondered what he was talking about. The girl immediately pulled her hands away from the boy and said she didn't have any older brothers. The boy who'd been so caring toward her was surprised by her aggression. Suddenly, someone entered the room they were in and asked who it was she didn't have. Then they said the girl looked pretty good. Just 3 days ago, it was impossible to even look at her. That person turned out to be the head of the trading group, who'd come to visit the girl. With a smile on her face, she said she'd told her to bring a flower, but she hadn't asked her to return in such a state. She also added that seeing a completely injured child had been pretty scary for her. Suddenly, the subordinate Lennox entered the room and asked his mistress if she could at least speak a little more gently. The woman sighed deeply and asked who she had to thank for being so flustered for the first time in ages. The girl asked, was she really flustered? But at the same time, she thought, didn't Chloe not care about other people? The main heroine remembered that in the novel, this woman was definitely described as a character so cold-blooded that even her cuts didn't bleed. All that drove her then was a thirst for revenge, harbored deep in her soul. The head told the girl that first, she should apologize to her. The girl, in turn, asked what she had to apologize for. The woman added that, honestly, she'd thought that once she went beyond the fortress gates, she'd get scared and give up. After all, the forest was dark, and she wasn't in the best condition then. After that, the subordinate stood up with a flask containing the flower. The head noted that they told her it was indeed the girl who found this flower. This flower is called Stacia. It's a rather rare flower with a pain-relieving effect. It turns out it only grows in rocky areas, so cultivating it is very difficult, and finding it is even harder. Hearing this, the heroine rejoiced and asked if it was really that expensive. She was also very curious if it'd work as a gift for the woman. The woman, in turn, noted that it definitely worked and jokingly said it could be sold for 100 gold pieces, but that was just its price. Then she kept looking at the girl and told her she'd achieved something quite impossible. Because of that, it turned out the girl had won. These words from the head of the trading group greatly delighted the heroine. She immediately thought she'd really managed everything. The new acquaintance who'd been looking after the girl all this time congratulated her right away. The woman kept talking, saying she'd gotten the documents and the flower. She also asked if now they should probably hear what exactly the girl wanted, or not. The main heroine immediately said she didn't need much at all. She just wanted this woman to make her the heir of the trading group, that's all. All the head's subordinates were very surprised, hearing these words. The woman was also very surprised and asked what she'd just said. She wondered if being an heir wasn't a bit much. The girl immediately told her that it'd be enough for her to just pass her the status. At the same time, she didn't really need to hand over the group itself. The heroine immediately thought that even if it was the heir's position and not the head of the trading group, it'd still be enough for her to hold it until the main hero appeared. Right then, she wondered if all this would be enough to change the story. The woman regained her composure a bit and said that if it was just for survival, it'd be easier to settle for the trading group's protection. Now she was curious why she'd go this far. The heroine said she just wanted to change the ending. The woman asked what ending she was talking about, but the girl added it was about the happy ending everyone wanted, where, following the Villainess' death, her daughter dies too. Then she confidently added that she wasn't going to indulge others' desires. All this was only because she wanted to live. That's why she'd do everything to write her own story and live even happier than those who wished her misfortune. Even if all this struggle had no chance of success, the woman listened very carefully to the girl's story and was shocked by her words. Suddenly, the heroine covered her mouth and thought she'd probably spoken too maturely. At the same time, thoughts started creeping in that her unchildlike behavior might push them all away. But the woman began saying she'd grown up in the same orphanage as this girl. The main heroine thought, hearing this, that it was exactly as described in the novel. The woman kept talking, saying she'd been sold to the black market before she came of age. Because of that, she had to endure a lot of suffering. The worst part was that it wasn't just her who was sold, but her friends too. There were those who died and those who lived so miserably that death would have been better. When she learned it was all the work of a friend from the orphanage who was now its director, she firmly decided to take revenge on him. That's exactly why she wasn't going to let him off so easily. It was simply unacceptable that he'd ruined her life and her friends' lives back then and now slept peacefully with his legs stretched out. The woman said she was gathering strength so he'd pay for it. The materials the girl brought would also help her a lot. It turned out the girl had the Duchy of Hernus, and she had the orphanage. With a smile on her face, she said that, from her perspective, they had a lot in common. Then she told her to stay by her side. First, the girl would need to learn to assess the value of things and make really good deals. The main heroine immediately recalled that these were the words she'd said to the main hero in the original. She'd said them only to her now. That meant what was addressed to her now signified only her victory. The heroine immediately asked the woman if she was really letting her live with them and become the heir. Hearing this question, the woman said she'd initially planned to just support her, but the girl's courage, malice, and will had really won her over. Right after that, she added that it turned out she had enough rights to become her daughter, which meant the heir. The subordinates also said that, of course, it'd be that way. Then the head placed her hand on the main heroine's head and said that from now on, she was the heir of this trading group. Because of that, it turned out that in the future, she'd become Daphne Benedetto. After that, she hugged the girl and maternally told her to come to her, calling her little one. Some time later, there was beautiful weather outside, and birds were sitting on the trees, singing their songs. At that time, the main heroine was sitting in the arms of the head's subordinate, looking at the wonderful atmosphere outside the window. Suddenly, the girl turned to Lennox. He immediately asked what the girl wanted. The heroine wondered if she was too heavy. The guy noted that not at all, and she shouldn't worry about it one bit. Then he added that assembling a wheelchair took too much time, and crutches would be very hard for a little girl to manage. That's exactly why the guy had volunteered to help her with everything for a while. The main heroine wondered if all these words were really true. After all, they weren't even a real family, so why was he so kind? She thought, did this guy have some strange hidden motive, like her previous mentor Uline had? She also wondered what she should do then if he was sincere. Suddenly, the guy turned to Daphne and mentioned her hair. The girl asked what he wanted to ask. Then he said they'd really turned grey, and it even affected her eyelashes. He added that they say hair usually turns grey from a big shock or very intense pain. He noted that she must have suffered a lot when she fell from that height. After that, he started getting angry at himself and said that if he'd found her in the forest a little earlier, maybe it wouldn't have been like this. Daphne immediately said she was fine after all, she hadn't died. Though it turned out she'd lost the collar she inherited from her real mother, now she had hair like Mistress Close. At the same time, the heroine thought maybe her mother had taken the purple color and given her white. Maybe her mother really wanted to give her a new life. The girl thought about this, and there was a warmth in her soul, as if from her own mother's freedom. Lennox immediately noticed something was off with the girl, as it seemed like tears were welling up in her eyes. But suddenly, Ricardo approached them and spoke up. With a smile on his face, he declared that they should come to his place as soon as possible. After all, he had specially prepared only the very, very tastiest things. Indeed, at that moment, the table was laden with a feast unlike anything the girl could see every day at her own table. When the little girl sat down at the table, her eyes practically sparkled with joy. She immediately thought that this was simply wonderful and completely unlike the food she had eaten at the orphanage. Then she thought that this must be the most famous trading group in the empire, and it was true that it operated on an entirely different level. The girl's eyes shone brightly as she looked at the food, and the head of the group remarked that she was staring at it so strangely. At the same time, she asked if perhaps all these dishes weren't to her taste. Hearing this, the girl quickly clarified that it wasn't like that at all, she was just a little surprised. Ricardo, with a smile on his face again, noted that if the girl wanted, he'd give her more servings, so she shouldn't worry and should eat plenty. Then they began discussing the pie, agreeing that the girl absolutely had to try it. After a short while, the head of the trading band put down her utensils and announced that they were done with the meal. Then she turned to Daphne and said that first, she would tell her about the work the girl would have to do in the future. The heroine replied that it was indeed so and that she was listening carefully. At the same time, she thought that, as expected, the head of the trading group never did anything without a reason. It turned out she had given her a place to sleep and plenty of food, so now it was time to pay for it all. The girl asked the head what exactly she would need to do. She knew she was certain she was ready for anything except her own death. The woman replied that it wouldn't be anything complicated, just 2 things. She immediately asked if the girl could handle it. Daphne pointed out that she was being asked for an answer before even being told what she'd have to do. She had no choice and agreed right away. The woman noted that if that was the case, then good. Then she added that, first, the girl's weak body, which was as fragile as a sheet of paper, would need to be brought back to normal. The heroine asked what she meant by that and wondered if she really trembled like paper. Then the matron smiled and said that, second, the girl would need to come up with at least 5 wishes she'd like to have fulfilled and tell the woman about. She asked again if the girl could manage that. Ricardo smiled and said everything had worked out well for her, adding that she could ask for anything she wanted. The heroine said she'd thought the woman would assign her some kind of work. She asked if these 2 conditions were related to her rights as an heiress. The matron replied that, of course, they were. After all, health was the most important thing for anyone. And for a merchant, the life and death of their business were directly tied to how great their greed was. She added that it was essential for the girl to experience this herself. The girl asked if it was really true. The woman confirmed that, of course, it would need to learn to hide her greed, but first, she'd have to learn to bring it out a little. The heroine said that in that case, everything would be fine, she'd recover and think about what she wanted. The head of the trading band added that there was no deadline, so she could think freely, but a merchant, even without freedom, must act as if they have it. She also mentioned that, speaking of which, she'd almost forgotten to give her something. Suddenly, the girl saw a familiar object and asked if it was really her bag. She remembered that there was something inside it. After all, it still wasn't clear what the seal she'd decided to take with the documents was for. The heroine wondered if the matron had seen the seal. Then, with a surprised expression, she said she'd thought she'd already lost that little bag. The woman handed her the bag and said she'd thought there might be something important inside, which is why she hadn't thrown it away but kept it instead. Hearing this, the heroine wondered if she was being tested. After all, she'd intended to keep the seal as her very last resort. Suddenly, the girl recalled the woman's words that a merchant, even without freedom, must act as if they have it. After that, she thought she should give it a try. She was a little nervous but figured she wasn't playing any role right now. The heroine smiled sweetly and told the woman she hadn't expected her to keep it. She immediately thanked the matron for it, thinking she'd done so quite sincerely. The head said it was fine and laughed, but she immediately thought that she wasn't revealing her final trump card and praised her little girl for such a wonderful move. Then she said it was time for her to slowly get back to work. Lennox would be free for now, so he could look after the girl. Ricardo told the girl that her brother would definitely learn healing magic. Right after that, the head left the room with one of her subordinates. Lennox turned to Daphne and asked what they should do in the meantime, wondering if there was anything the girl wanted. She replied that she didn't even know what she might want. Hearing this, the boy said he could tidy up her hair then. After a while, they started doing just that. The heroine mentioned that at the orphanage, she'd always done it herself because she didn't like how people would scold her hair color every time they brushed it. The boy remarked that it must have been really scary back then. The girl said it just felt like those moments were harsher than usual for her. Still, she could have easily endured it. No, she couldn't even properly recall how it all went. After all, plenty of worse things had happened to her than that. Listening to this very sad story the girl was telling, tears welled up in the boy's eyes, and he grew sad. After a while, his tears started dripping down, and the girl heard it. She immediately turned to him and asked what was wrong with Lennox. She thought that since it had happened to someone else, why was he crying now? The girl was also very curious about why Ricardo wanted so badly to heal the Villainess daughter, even learning healing magic and assuring her they'd succeed and save her. She also couldn't understand why the people she'd met just months ago cared for her so much, and why the head of this band called her their little one and treated her so kindly. Now she realized they were quite sincere, unlike Uline. But all this affection, received for the first time since her birth into this world, felt too foreign to her. Tears welled up in the heroine's eyes too because of this. She told Lennox she was a very greedy child and didn't want to lose what she'd gained even once. That's why she wanted them not to treat her so warmly. She thought that if they ever changed, she wouldn't be able to bear it anymore. Some time after those events, the girl was lying in bed. She overheard Lennox and Ricardo talking. The latter asked if Daphne had really asked them not to treat her too well. The girl woke up from their conversation and wondered who was talking. Then she slightly opened her eyes and saw Lennox saying it was true and that he'd been at a loss, not knowing how to comfort her. His companion said he was disappointed in him. He should have refused her and then told her not to worry while patting her head. The girl immediately realized who was speaking. Suddenly, she shifted her gaze to the other side and saw a woman there. She said that since she'd even returned the seal to the girl, it was Daphne's last trump card, and they needed to show her respect. The heroine thought that even the matron was there, and they were all so kind to her. Right after that, she closed her eyes again and thought she wished it were all real. Then the girl fell back asleep and woke up again after some time. She thought that while she slept, it seemed like she'd heard all their voices. But then she wondered if maybe none of it had happened. There was a chance it had all just been a dream, her dreams of a real life while she slept. In the corner of the room stood a basin of water with a towel dipped in it. The girl thought how she wished it were all true. She also thought that since she wasn't sure, maybe she should just ask them. But then she decided it was better not to. That way, she'd avoid bothering them needlessly, and it was better not to ask anyone anything. Suddenly, the heroine shifted her gaze to the far side of the room and noticed someone there. It was Kalu, the head of the group. She immediately addressed her little girl and asked if she'd finally woken up. The girl quickly got out of bed and confirmed that it was so. The woman asked if she'd dreamed of something nice. The heroine said she didn't even know. After all, she wasn't sure if it had even been a dream. The woman replied that she understood and took the towel, soaking it in the basin of water. Right after that, she began wiping the little girl's face. She said she hoped the girl would at least have a good dream tomorrow. The heroine thought that this woman was so kind and sweet. It felt as if they truly accepted her into their family. Still, she wondered if she could just accept all their kindness so easily. The girl immediately turned to the matron and asked why Lennox and Ricardo were so kind to her. Tears welled up in her eyes, and she looked quite bewildered. Hearing this question, the woman asked the little girl if she was still worried about it. The girl quickly covered her mouth with her hands and thought, had she really said that out loud? Then she leaned forward, wondering if the woman would want to know why she was asking such a thing. She thought about what she'd do if the woman said she hated her. Suddenly, the head told her little girl that she'd prepared a gift for her and asked if she'd like to see it. The girl immediately lifted her head and looked at her questioningly. The woman picked the girl up in her arms and carried her somewhere. The heroine lay in her arms, wondering what this gift could be and whether she even had the right to accept any gifts from her. After a short while, the matron stopped and told the little girl they'd finally arrived. She asked if she'd like to lift her head now. After all, this was her new room. Right after that, the girl looked up and saw a beautiful room, exquisitely decorated. The head said it was her new big bed. Then she turned to the other side and pointed out her wardrobe. Now she had a whole collection of clothes, so she could dress up however she liked. The wardrobe was indeed filled with a huge number of dresses in various colors and styles. She added that there were many useful things in this room, but besides everything else, the woman had prepared a vanity table for her. She'd also bought a doll, just in case. She kept talking, urging the girl to look around. She had a writing desk, a tea table, and so much more. The girl, with wide eyes, took in the entire room and thought it was real. No matter how she looked at it, the room had truly been decorated just for her. Tears welled up in her eyes because she simply couldn't believe someone had done this for her. The heroine said she really liked it honestly, she liked it a lot. The woman immediately asked why she was crying then. In turn, she asked why they all treated her so well. It seemed they cared for her so much that it was hard for her to believe it now. It was because she'd thought they'd only provide the bare necessities, and that would be it. But if they kept going like this, she wouldn't want to give any of it up. The head immediately hugged the girl and said she hadn't thought it would be so hard for her to accept their efforts. She asked if there was anything she could do to keep her from getting upset. The heroine said no one had ever been this kind to her before. That's why she didn't know if she had the right to accept it all, fearing they might hate her later and say she was no longer needed, casting her aside as a result. And if they said they'd stopped loving her and threw her out, she, having lost the warmth and care they'd given her, wouldn't find the strength to go on living. The matron smiled and told Daphne that in the future, when she had a child, she wouldn't want them to go through the same thing. Hearing this, the girl immediately sat up and said that, of course, she'd never want that. With that response, the woman smiled too and said she could see now that she didn't want it either. She'd taken this position because she'd overcome countless hardships. It turned out she'd walked a tough path early on to never lack for anything again. She asked if her future daughter would have to endure the same. She said it was simply unthinkable. She wouldn't let her child lack anything, be it love, money, possessions, or anything else. Then she touched the girl's face and said she was her daughter, her child. She could be the one to start this relationship, but the woman would take care of the rest. The girl just needed to accept what she was given. Hearing these words, the girl immediately asked if that meant she didn't have to do anything. The head told her to simply grow up healthy and not get sick, do whatever she pleased, and enjoy whatever she wanted. That way, she'd live a happy life, never regretting anything. If she managed that, she'd easily achieve the results she desired. She also noted that neither Lennox nor Ricardo planned to inherit the trading guild, so the girl shouldn't worry she wasn't taking anything from them. Then she asked if their sweet little girl had been afraid she was taking her older brother's place. The heroine thought these were words she hadn't even dared to dream of. Those very words warmed her heart deeply. The tightly shut doors of her heart swung wide open. The girl immediately wondered if it could all really be true. Could she just unconditionally receive love and everything it brought? They'd said she was part of their family, and now they'd help each other on the path to their dreams. Weighing it all, the girl realized there was no longer any reason to refuse their love. Right after that, she hugged the woman sitting beside her tightly. A few moments after the embrace, the girl sat up and said she had her first wish. She asked if she could call this woman her matron. The woman leaned down and, with a smile, said that of course she could, and there was no need to waste a wish on that. The heroine pointed out that she'd said herself that she could be the one to start this relationship. Then she added that she had another wish. The girl really wanted her to teach her how to write. The woman asked if she really wanted it to be her specifically. She then said they'd have to pretend she hadn't made that second wish, since she'd already planned to teach her how to write. Suddenly, two more of the heroine's new brothers entered the room. Ricardo, smiling as always, told Daphne that this was where she'd been. Then he rushed into their embrace and said their Daphne was so adorable. Linux remarked that it was pointless trying to hold him back. Right after that, he joined the hug too, saying he'd join them then. His brother immediately asked what he was doing and told him to leave, or he'd end up smothering the girl. The other replied that he should just move over then. The boy told the matron if she'd heard that and said to Daphne that her brother was being picked on. The heroine just lay there, savoring the moment and thanking them all. She thought she'd become happy no matter what. At night, two boys were making their way through a dark forest. One of them was none other than the main hero of the second part of the novel. Sometime after those events, Ricardo called for everyone's attention, saying he had a suggestion. He said they should only leave the house when absolutely necessary. Linux asked why not, and his companion replied that, of course, it was because Daphne would feel lonely if everyone left. The girl asked what he was talking about. The matron immediately said it was a good idea. That way, she'd finish all her overtime work at home. Linux wondered if even the matron had agreed to this. Then he noted that it seemed even she had changed a little. The woman asked what had just said. And so it happened Ricardo constantly fed the girl various delicious treats he'd made himself. Her mother, in turn, also found time for the girl and taught her what she asked for. Linux, too, often walked with the girl, cheering her up. They all began taking turns caring for their little girl. It seemed to the heroine that they all loved arguing over who'd get to stay with her on any given day. Offendedly, she realized she was smiling much more often than before. One day, it was nearly midnight, and the girl sat by the light of an oil lamp, writing something. She said she didn't understand one part of the assignment, which is why she'd ask her matron about it when she returned. Then she looked up and noticed it was already 11 o'clock. Right after that, she thought that usually she'd already be fast asleep by this time. The girl recalled that earlier that same day, she'd made a mess. The food Ricardo had prepared was next to Linux's coffee. She mixed up the cups and drank the coffee. Linux noticed, but it was already too late. As a result, the matron found out and ended up scolding them both harshly. That's also why she couldn't fall asleep because of the caffeine, so she ended up continuing her studies with her matron in her office. Then something happened. At one point, the matron said there was an urgent matter in the capital, and she had to go there. She told Daphne to wait for her here. It was already late, and the girl thought her matron was taking a long time. Then she felt that she'd been studying all this time and her neck had stiffened because of it. While she was stretching it, she noticed the clock glowing brightly. She thought that the clock only glowed like that when someone passed through it. She immediately thought it must be none other than her mother. With a smile on her face, she started saying that she'd finally returned. But just moments later, two boys stepped out, not the woman she'd been expecting. The heroine was utterly shocked by what she saw before her. She immediately thought she must be seeing things poorly in the dark, but it definitely wasn't the woman she'd been waiting for. The girl began closely examining the silhouettes of these boys and felt a very bad premonition. She thought that perhaps this was the moment the main hero of the second part appeared. But she was troubled by the thought of why there were two of them. She couldn't understand which one of them was the main hero now. The heroine immediately wondered if she didn't know because he was shrouded in mystery. The readers never got a detailed description of him. She was tormented by thoughts of how she'd figure out which one was the main hero. Just a moment later, one of the boys lunged at the heroine and declared he'd caught her. But then he saw a little girl in front of him and wondered what this was all about. The girl remembered that the main hero had been captured when he tried to kill the matron. She thought it couldn't possibly be true. Could this really be him standing before her now? She was also very curious about why this was happening today of all days. The heroine recalled that there had been several partial coincidences with the original plot. That's how she'd accidentally drunk the coffee and couldn't sleep until late at night. And as a result, she'd stayed in her matron's office when she had to step out to the capital. Now she simply couldn't believe she'd encountered the main hero at the moment of an assassination attempt. It was as if the story was putting everything back in place, once again paving the way to the fate destined for the Villainess daughter. Now she wondered if she was a hostage to this plot. The boy asked the heroine who she even was. He also asked where the head of the trading guild was. The other boy who'd arrived with him slowly approached too. The girl didn't answer, and the boy said that wouldn't do. He immediately pulled a knife from his pocket and held it to the girl. He said he'd figure out where she was after he killed her. The heroine was terrified by this turn of events. She immediately started screaming for her matron, Lennox, and Ricardo, begging for help and asking them to save her. The boys, who were at the library at that moment, wondered what was going on. The stranger trying to take her life heard this and shouted at her to shut up. The heroine's brothers rushed in at her cries for help. Bursting into the room, the boys froze, shocked by what they saw before them. Some unknown person had grabbed the girl and was holding her by force, keeping her hostage. He told them to stay back and not come closer. Ricardo immediately asked what this scoundrel was doing. The stranger was a little rattled after that, but he kept telling them not to come closer. The heroine looked into his eyes and wondered if this creep, holding a child hostage, was really the main hero of the second part of the novel. At that very moment, the real main hero stood in another part of the room, near the clock they'd come through. Ricardo asked the stranger again who he even was. He demanded that he let the girl go immediately, but the stranger said he'd told them not to come closer. The brother got angry at this and said he'd told him to let her go right now. Using his power, he summoned some kind of magical circle. The mysterious stranger was shocked and asked what that was. Suddenly, chains emerged from the magical circle and wrapped around the boy's body. Bound, he shouted that this was bad, he was dealing with a mage. At that moment, the heroine slipped from his grasp and fell toward the floor. Lennox noticed this and caught his little sister just in time. He looked at the frightened girl and asked if she was okay. The other brother also asked if Daphne was hurt, saying he'd check her over right now. At that moment, as he was distracted by the girl, the other boy who had come with him attacked from behind. Lennox shouted to Ricardo that there was danger behind him. He immediately turned around and asked what this was now. There, he saw another boy attacking him. Then he used the same power he'd used on the first one. He asked how this boy dared to do such a thing. Moments later, this mysterious boy was bound in chains too. After that, Ricardo looked at them and asked who this scoundrel was. It turned out he hadn't even noticed him in the room earlier. Now both intruders hung bound in the room. The first one struggled to break free, shouting for them to let him go. The second one just hung there silently, not making a sound. Ricardo said this was some strange boy. Even when they strung him up, he didn't make a peep. Then he thought that none of that mattered right now. He ran to the girl and asked how she was. While he tried to check on his little sister, the silent stranger who'd been quiet started trying to break free from the chains. The brother told the heroine he could use healing magic, but the girl said she was fine. Right now, it was more important to figure out why these people had come here. Suddenly, she noticed the silent boy break free from the chains, tearing them apart with his hands. He jumped down, and the heroine shouted that it was dangerous. The brothers immediately turned their attention to the strange boy who had escaped. Ricardo said it was impossible. How had he broken his magic? Lennox was shocked too, asking if he'd really destroyed the chains himself. Suddenly, the boy charged at the people in the room with incredible speed. The heroine immediately thought he was closing in at an unbelievable pace, clearly aiming for her. But at that moment, Lennox shielded her with his body, yet the boy didn't intend to attack them and sped past. Seeing this, the girl wondered what had just happened. Did he really just run by? She grew curious about what his real goal was. At that moment, the boy approached the person who'd come with him. That person wanted to thank him for the rescue, but the boy pulled out a knife and held it to his companion's throat. Moments later, the second boy's throat was slit. Ricardo was utterly shocked by what he saw and couldn't believe his eyes. He immediately said that boy was definitely dead. The heroine saw this and thought it was terrifying. After all, the person who'd threatened her just a minute ago had died so easily in an instant. But then she thought it didn't make her feel any better. Breathing was still hard. She wondered if the final moments were always so agonizing. The silent boy turned and looked in their direction. He seemed to be deciding who his next victim would be. Moments later, he made his choice and moved toward the heroine and her brothers. Seeing this, Ricardo shouted that this creep was coming for them. At that moment, the clock began glowing brightly again. That could only mean someone else was approaching and passing through it. Lennox saw it and said the light meant someone was coming. The stranger froze, staring at the clock. Suddenly, a mist began creeping toward him, enveloping his body completely. He wondered what it meant. A woman appeared and immediately asked the stranger how he dared show up here. She was very curious if he even understood where he was. Then she snapped her fingers, and the mist pinned the boy to the ceiling. This was the head of the trading band and the heroine's matron. She immediately apologized to the kids for arriving so late and asked if they were all right. Lennox quickly told the head that these people had attacked Daphne. The woman asked him to repeat what Head just said. The girl thought that even her matron's arrival didn't make her feel any better. After all, she was still trembling with fear. But then she noticed that the people dear to her were safe, and she was okay too, so that was something. She looked at the attackers and wondered who this person was. Judging by his appearance, he was still a child. Moments later, the girl locked eyes with him. She noticed his purple eyes, which reminded her of violets. She immediately thought this wasn't simple, those were beautiful violet eyes. Recalling the novel's plot, the heroine realized this boy was the main hero of the second part. Now she was completely certain of it. Lennox, holding the heroine in his arms, stood and studied the stranger. After a while, he turned to the matron and Ricardo and said he didn't know who this person was, but he really wanted to finish him off. The heroine was a little frightened by her older brother's words. He continued, saying the stranger had a knife and was clearly about to kill Daphne. Now they simply couldn't let him live. Ricardo joined in, saying he agreed with those words. The boy added that, either way, this person was no different from other killers. Who knew what else he might do, so it was better to deal with him quickly. The heroine thought how they could talk about killing so easily. If the main hero died, the story wouldn't reach its end. She wondered if that meant everything would end then. She was curious if she'd stay alive if she let them carry out their plan. Suddenly, the head of the trading guild addressed Lennox and Ricardo. She used her magic and directed it toward the strange boy. The boy, who'd been hanging near the ceiling all this time, was effortlessly brought back to the ground by the woman. He was surprised, wondering why she'd done it. Right after that, the woman said they needed to think everything through carefully before acting. Hearing this, the heroine realized it was true. Her matron wouldn't just kill him like that. After all, according to the original plot, had become her successor, and she wouldn't be able to kill him. The head approached the boy and began studying him closely. Then she smiled slyly and said that, considering how scared Daphne had been, he shouldn't even hope for a quick death. Hearing this, the heroine thought she hadn't even suspected her matron could have such a face and a completely different tone. That's why she'd always admired the head of the trading guild. After that, the girl looked at the sitting boy and realized it was true, the plot had already changed. It had happened because she'd taken the main hero's place earlier. So, with his death, the story would end. She also realized there was nothing she could do. She still wanted to live. But then she thought that things wouldn't go as she'd hoped. At that moment, she recalled the knight's words when she'd asked him what would happen to her mother. He'd said her mother would be punished and end up in hell. And the words of those children had always humiliated her, saying her mother had died and everyone said it was for the best. The girl thought that if things kept going this way, she'd become like those she'd always hated. She just didn't want to be like them. If this child died, she'd blame herself for the rest of her life. After all, his place had been meant for her. The heroine recalled the murder that had happened right before her eyes, and her mother's death, passing away all alone. It turned out that every time, it was so hard for her to witness such things. Since the novel's plot promised her anything but a happy ending, it started to feel like everything happening to others was actually happening to her. That's exactly why she didn't want to witness anyone's death. Suddenly, the girl burst into tears and said they shouldn't do it. The boy holding her looked at her, wondering what was wrong. She kept crying and saying they shouldn't kill anyone. Life was priceless, after all. And this boy was just a child too. She thought that even if this was her last chance to bring the novel to a close, she didn't want to build her happiness on someone else's misery. At that moment, her new mother turned to the girl. She said she hadn't even thought of doing any of that. She just shouldn't have said such scary things in front of the girl. Lennox, with a sad tone, asked if they'd scared her and told Daphne they were so sorry. Ricardo, in turn, said he knew their Daphne was very kind, but he hadn't realized just how much. Hearing this, the girl thought no one was even pressuring her. Tears welled up in her eyes again, and the woman, taking her in her arms, said her eyes would swell up like that. After all, her older brothers weren't judging her for those words. The heroine immediately thought her eyes were probably teary again. She carefully started wiping them so her face wouldn't look like she'd been crying. While she was doing that, she noticed the boy sitting below staring at her intently. She immediately wondered why he was looking at her. For a moment, she wondered what was up. His eyes were strange. She felt a certain power in them that gave her chills. The heroine turned to her matron and said this boy had rather strange eyes. That's why she thought something was off about them. Hearing this, Ricardo asked if it was true. He said that if it was, they should check it right now. He immediately used his magical technique and directed it at the boy sitting below. The applied force slowly spread around the boy, gradually touching him. The contact caused him a little pain. It grew more and more painful, and he started screaming louder and louder. Everyone watched him closely, and the heroine found the sight frightening. After some time, the technique stopped, and the silent boy's eyes changed. The heroine, who'd been watching closely, wondered if his eyes had really changed. Ricardo then said Daphne had been right. It turned out this mysterious boy had been under hypnotic magic. Because of that, the spell had been cast very sloppily. After the technique was applied, the boy immediately lost his strength and passed out. The head of the trading guild immediately said it wasn't surprising he was too young to be an assassin. She asked if those scoundrels had completely lost their conscience. The woman grew very angry and said something needed to be done about these monsters who dared to toy with children's lives, and a few other bad things too. They shouldn't even hope for an easy death now. The heroine was quite pleased by her matron's words. Moments later, the woman realized she was saying scary things in front of a child. She quickly covered the girl with her hand and said what was she even saying? The girl should forget everything she'd just heard. The girl immediately said she'd do just that. The head continued, saying they couldn't leave this child in such a state anyway. She turned to her subordinate Lennox and asked if he remembered the enclosure in the forest. He asked if she meant the one he'd used to trap wild animals. The woman confirmed that was exactly it, and the boy should sit there for a bit. After all, even though he'd been under hypnosis, a killer was still a killer, and caution never hurt. Ricardo said he'd cast a binding spell. Since it had come to this, he asked if they should figure out who was behind it all. Lennox told him to leave it to him. He knew how to get the truth out of people. The head of the trading guild said everything was set then, and she was counting on them. The heroine, sitting in her arms, was happy that no one had died. She looked at her older brothers and thought they really got along wonderfully. She realized this was her family now. It turned out this was the family she'd chosen herself, one that valued her deeply. That's exactly why she wanted to live a long, happy life with her loved ones. At the same time, she hadn't abandoned her plans to drastically change the plot. The girl remembered that the original story was quite convoluted. Though the main hero grew up in this place where she was now, the past of the Benedetta Trading Guild was never mentioned in the story. It was unclear what happened to them when he left the position of head to marry the main heroine. Because of all this, it wasn't just that they wanted to protect her, the girl wanted to shield them from future danger too. To carry out all her plans, the girl would simply have to change the plot of the second part of the novel she was in. However, despite everything, she couldn't resort to killing. She thought that if killing wasn't an option, she'd just surround the main hero with care and win his favor. It probably wouldn't affect the plot too much, but she had a feeling this way she could alter the course of the story. She wouldn't let Duke Enos's daughter become the happy main heroine at the expense of her own happiness, to protect herself and those dear to her. Sometime after those events, the girl woke up and didn't understand what was happening around her. She also knew she definitely couldn't move her legs before this. But now she was running and couldn't figure out how it was happening. She immediately wondered if it was a dream and asked herself where she was rushing to. Suddenly, she stopped and turned around, wondering who she was running from. She realized there was impenetrable darkness around her, but someone was there. Dark thoughts flooded her mind, and she wondered if this person was about to grab her. Suddenly, someone addressed the girl, calling her young mistress. They placed a hand on her shoulder and asked if she was okay. Startled by this, the girl woke up with a frightened look. She sat up abruptly and wondered what was happening and why she'd had such a strange dream. At that moment, a man stood by her bedside. He smiled and said he'd probably startled her after all. He added that he was glad to meet her. Then he introduced himself, saying his name was Winston Chisler, and that he was the secretary to the guild's head. Still smiling, he said it seemed like the girl was having a nightmare, which is why he'd woken her. He asked if she was okay. The girl immediately thanked him for it. But he said there was no need for formality, she was the one he served, after all. Some time later, they set off together to another place. The secretary asked if she wanted to go to the enclosure. The girl confirmed that was exactly it, she wanted to meet that boy. Then the heroine asked Winston to tell her where this wheelchair had come from. He said it had been prepared for the young mistress long ago. Had found it in the wardrobe, and it seemed no one had even used it yet. Hearing this, the heroine wondered what he was talking about. After all, her whole family had said it would take a long time to make one for her. She grew upset, thinking how they could have lied to her for so long. Her companion immediately asked her to accept his apologies. He added that he assumed they hadn't taken very good care of her since she was so small and fragile. The heroine thought that was pretty much in line with their style. Moments later, they finally reached the forest. The secretary said the enclosure was right there in that forest where they were now. The girl, looking around, said it was so big. A few moments later, the enclosure came into view, and the boy pointed it out. Suddenly, the secretary noticed food nearby. He immediately said the boy hadn't even touched the food he'd brought him that morning. As they approached, the girl looked into the enclosure and said she didn't see anyone. She asked the boy if he was sure the person was inside. Winston said he'd check. A moment later, he told the girl he was indeed there. She probably just hadn't spotted him because he was tucked right into the corner. The girl moved even closer to the enclosure and started peering in closely. She noted that it was hard to see him clearly. Suddenly, she saw that there really was a boy sitting there. He heard someone approaching and immediately looked up at the new visitors. They exchanged a few glances, and suddenly the boy's stomach growled loudly. The girl, hearing this, was very surprised. Winston immediately said this boy hadn't eaten a crumb despite being so hungry. He added that he'd probably been well trained. The heroine asked what he meant by trained. He explained that he'd likely been conditioned during brainwashing. As a result, he wouldn't break an order given to him no matter what. The girl realized that's why he hadn't eaten a bite, even after being freed from hypnosis. In her mind, she wondered how someone could not touch food while feeling such hunger. She remembered herself at the orphanage even when the table was overflowing with delicious dishes. She was only given meager scraps. If she touched anything else, she'd be beaten right away, so she'd grown used to hunger. The heroine kept looking at the boy locked in the cage, wondering what to do. After all, she really wanted him to finally eat something. Suddenly, she told Winston to bring her closer to him. She wanted to feed him herself, but he immediately said she couldn't, it was too dangerous. The girl quickly told him that had heard that awful growling. He wasn't eating despite the intense hunger he was feeling. She wondered if he might be scared of an adult stranger. Now she was curious if he'd eat if she gave him the food herself. The boy turned, relenting, and said it would be as she wished. He added that he'd do it, but asked her not to stick her hand into the enclosure. She could only watch him. Hearing this, the girl agreed with a sweet smile. Then he brought her very close to the cage. She exchanged glances with the boy and greeted him right away. But the boy didn't say anything back and only made a very stern face. Seeing this, the girl realized hostility was practically radiating from him. She thought he definitely wouldn't eat if she just handed him a sandwich. She wondered what to do, maybe just toss the sandwich to him. Then she dismissed the idea, thinking he wasn't an animal, and it would only make things worse. She started brainstorming what she could come up with. A moment later, she realized she'd completely forgotten one important thing. Then she stood up from her wheelchair, knowing what she had to do. The secretary asked what she was doing. But the girl said she just needed a minute to do what she'd planned. She approached the cage closely and thought she needed to act carefully and smile. She immediately thought it would definitely work. She knew from experience and recalled her new matron. After all, it was that woman's kindness that had warmed her heart. Then she turned to the boy and asked why he wasn't eating at all. He didn't respond again, and the girl continued, saying he must be hungry. The food she'd brought was pretty tasty. If he kept this up, he'd get too weak. That way, he wouldn't even be able to escape this place. Hearing this, the boy grew slightly wary and thought there was some truth to her words. After that, he started staring intently at the food the girl was holding. Seeing this, she thought her words might have worked. She decided to just place the food inside. Then she said that maybe he couldn't eat because the food was outside. She noted that now it would be easier for him to eat. After all, she didn't want anything bad, she just wanted him to eat well. She knew firsthand what hunger was like. Then she took some water too and said she'd put that inside as well. She added that he should drink it if he got thirsty. The stranger looked at it all and thought he should probably eat. He reached for the sandwich and the water and began the meal he'd been dreaming of for so long. The heroine watched him and couldn't help but feel delighted. She thought that as soon as she'd said all that, he'd pounced on the food. Still, she was very glad he'd eaten well. Suddenly, the secretary addressed her, calling her young mistress. He asked if they hadn't agreed she wouldn't stick her hands into the enclosure. She said what else could she have done, at least she'd convinced him, and had eaten. The boy lifted his mistress into his arms and said she couldn't sit on the cold ground. He added that it was time for them to head back. The girl asked, surprised, if it was really that soon. A moment later, she said to give her a minute. It was still cold, and the boy in the cage might freeze. She thought they should leave him a blanket to keep him warm. Her companion said she could do as she pleased. Then he took the blanket and placed it in the cage. The girl said winter wasn't over yet, so the boy might get cold. She added that he should definitely cover up so he wouldn't catch a cold. She also noted that next time, she'd bring him more treats. That's why he shouldn't get sick while she was gone. She asked him to behave well and if he'd do that. Right after that, with a smile on her face, she said that at their next meeting, she'd ask him to tell her his name. She'd tell him hers in return. The boy didn't respond again and just listened carefully to what she said. As the secretary wheeled the girl away, she asked if they'd made a deal. After all, what she'd said was a promise to him. He watched her leave and wondered what this was. Inside, he felt something strange. When the heroine got home, her matron immediately said she couldn't do that. She told her not to go to that strange boy anymore. The girl was sad about this and said it might be cold and lonely for him there. The head of the trading guild immediately said that wasn't true. This boy had been raised as a killer and was very dangerous. The heroine listened closely to what the woman said and thought she hadn't expected her to be so firm. After all, she needed to get close to him and win him over. If she didn't go, he'd go hungry again, and she'd planned to befriend him. She wondered if there was no way to convince her matron to let her go. At that moment, Ricardo sat at the table, tears streaming down his face. He said their little kitten was truly an angel. After all, she shouldn't be worrying about boys like that. Suddenly, the heroine thought she definitely had a way out. She turned to her matron and said that if she wouldn't let her go, she'd use her second wish. She smiled sweetly and said this was her second wish. She wanted to interact with the child sitting in the cage. The matron was very surprised by this request, but the girl said that without her, he'd just keep starving. He was so young, and it was probably scary for him to be alone in an unfamiliar place. The heroine added that she wouldn't go into the cage or open it. She also said she wouldn't visit him alone. Her older brothers were surprised by these wishes and her words too. The little girl continued, saying that if he kept trying to harm them, she'd give up then. The head asked if that meant she felt sorry for him or something. The heroine said, well, a little bit, yes. Right after that, the woman relented and said she could do as she pleased, but she immediately added that she'd have to keep the promises she'd made. The heroine was overjoyed and said she'd do just that. That very day, she wanted to go see the boy. This time, Ricardo accompanied her, helping her move in the wheelchair. Suddenly, the girl spotted the cage and said they'd arrived. Pointing, she said it was over there. The heroine greeted the boy and asked if he'd behaved well. He, sitting alone, immediately noticed the girl and looked up. Looking at him, she thought he was like a puppy waiting for its owner. Then she noticed the food sitting below and realized he hadn't eaten again. She decided there was nothing she could do about it in this situation and would have to go into the cage again. She turned to Ricardo. He asked what was wrong and what she wanted. The girl immediately asked him to set her down on the ground. Her older brother immediately said he wouldn't do that, the ground was cold. The girl pointed out that she knew he'd brought a cushion. He pulled out his backpack and said there was a blanket and a cushion inside. He added that she might get cold, so she'd need to wear mittens and a scarf. Suddenly, he pulled out a little jar and said this was the most important thing. In his hands was her favorite hot cocoa. The girl thought that was true. He asked if Daphne was happy about it. She smiled sweetly and said it was all very nice. Then she turned away and thought she couldn't tell him she didn't like cocoa because it was too sweet for her. After all, he'd prepared it with such care just for her. The heroine looked at the boy in the cage and wondered what was going on with him. He was staring intently at the things lying near the cage. She was quite surprised by this. She thought he was looking at everything with such curiosity, wondering if he'd never seen anything like it before, probably because he'd always been under magical control. For a moment, she wondered if he even remembered being a killer recently. Ricardo turned to the girl and asked if she knew everything. She started saying she couldn't go inside or open the cage. Hearing this, he immediately said she was such a smart girl. Still, he sat her closer to the cage, placing her on the cushion he'd brought. The heroine greeted the boy again and said they were closer now. Holding a box of food, she asked if he was hungry. After a long silence, the boy finally said he was. The heroine said, of course, he was. She added that she'd brought him warm soup, soft bread, and some fruit. She asked if he'd like to try it all. He said, of course, he would. But then the girl said she couldn't just give him the food like that. He said that meant she couldn't do it. She wanted to say he'd have to do something for her in return, but he interrupted her. He said that if she couldn't just give it to him, she could beat him instead, then she could give him the food for that. The girl, surprised, asked why beat him. She was curious why she'd need to do that. She also said he hadn't even eaten what they'd brought him yesterday. He said that food smelled strange. Ricardo whispered to the girl that it contained a truth serum. She thought that meant they'd added it to question the boy later. Then she wondered if he'd detected it just by the smell. A moment later, she asked the boy if he remembered where he'd lived before. She was also curious about how the people who fed him had treated him. He paused for a second and didn't answer. But a moment later, he told her that for food, they'd beaten him, kicked him, or yelled at him. Hearing this, the heroine was completely shocked. She thought, so that's the kind of harsh past the main hero of the second part of this novel had. The girl recalled that if everything had gone as in the novel, he could have lived happily if his mother hadn't abandoned him. She thought they must have treated him even worse than they'd treated her. After all, they'd even tried to turn him into a killer. So, she should be glad about his misfortune. He tried to kill her, after all. But still, she felt they were very alike. She told the boy she couldn't beat him, she wasn't that strong. He asked, but didn't he have to do something in return to get the food? Hearing this, the girl smiled sweetly at him and said her name was Daphne. She added that last time, she'd asked him to tell her his name when they met again. Now she wanted him to say it. She thought that, honestly, she already knew it from reading the novel, but she wanted to call him by his name after he told her himself. The boy didn't answer, and she asked if he didn't want to say it, but then he said his name was Ragnar. The girl smiled sweetly at this and said it was such a beautiful name. She thought this was the moment she'd first call him by his name, marking the first step toward getting closer. Right after that, she greeted Ragnar. After learning the boy's name, the heroine immediately handed him the food she'd brought. He, in turn, started eating. The boy devoured the food she'd brought very quickly. It seemed like he was so hungry he might even eat the cage. The heroine watched closely and was very surprised. She thought he must be starving. Just a few minutes later, all the dishes were empty. She asked if he'd eaten enough. He said, of course, he had. It was delicious. Suddenly, he looked up and tensed, as if something had scared him. At that moment, her older brother Ricardo was standing behind the heroine. The boy immediately looked frightened upon seeing him. Ragnar wondered if this person was so big because he was an adult. He recalled his childhood and thought, would he beat him too? Right after that, he scurried to the other corner of the cage, trying to hide from this person. Seeing this, Ricardo asked what was wrong. He didn't understand why he'd gotten so scared so suddenly. The heroine thought her older brother didn't look scary at all. She wondered if that meant Ragnar was afraid because he was just big. The girl immediately turned to her brother and told him to sit beside her. He asked what she wanted. She said he should just sit next to her quickly. He did so and asked if that was better. She looked at the boy in the cage and thought he seemed to calm down a bit. Then she thought she'd known it. Ragnar hated big people because they'd bullied him. It seemed they'd constantly punished him, and that's why he'd developed this fear. The heroine immediately thought they were indeed very alike. Now she wanted him to see the brighter side of this world too. Thinking this over, the girl moved closer to the cage and called out to Ragnar. He asked what she wanted from him. She poured hot cocoa into a cup and offered it to him. She said he should try it. It was the tastiest and warmest cocoa in the world. She placed the cup inside the cage and said it was her favorite drink. But today, she'd decided to give it to him. He immediately took the cup of hot cocoa and asked if he could really drink it. She said that if it was given to him, he should take it, and he started sipping it slowly. The heroine turned to Ricardo and apologized to him. After all, had made it for her, and she'd done this. He laughed and said it was no big deal. When they got home, he'd make her more of her favorite cocoa. Suddenly, they heard strange sounds from the boy in the cage. They saw his eyes light up, and he shouted that it was just so delicious. The main heroine smiled upon seeing this and thought that he was such a simpleton. Still, she was very glad that he had finally calmed down. Suddenly, at that moment, the boy addressed Daphne. She, in turn, asked what he wanted from her. The boy shyly said that she was staring at him so intently. He also asked if he wasn't ugly. He added that everyone had told him his eyes looked simply disgusting. The girl replied that, of course, they stood out because of their vertical pupils, like a reptile's. She added that she thought there was something special about them. Then she turned to Ragnar and asked him to look at her legs. The boy looked, and the girl said that because they were in such a state, she couldn't walk. That's why she moved around in a wheelchair. She then asked if he thought it looked disgusting. The boy replied that it wasn't like that at all. It didn't look disgusting in any way. The main heroine noted that she thought the same and added that he wasn't disgusting either. She mentioned that she generally liked the color purple. She immediately asked him to let her look at his eyes a bit longer. The boy asked how long she wanted to look at them. The girl said, until he was safe. She noted that she'd like to admire them often. That's why she'd come to see him every day. The boy blushed and got embarrassed by this. He asked the heroine if she was really going to come every day and look at his eyes, which everyone found repulsive. A week had passed since the girl met him. Unfortunately, Linux couldn't use the truth serum he had worked so hard to create. Whenever he brought food to the boy, Ragnar turned away from it, saying it smelled awful. That's why the main heroine came up with her own method. One day, she came to him and announced that today they'd play a question and answer game. The boy didn't sense any trickery and was very excited about the game. Thus, the girl turned an interrogation into a game where they asked each other all sorts of questions. That's how she learned Ragnar's name and the location of the mercenary group. But by the time they got there, it was too late. No trace of them remained. One day, the girl came to play with him again. Ragnar said that today he'd start asking first. He immediately asked how the girl had injured her legs. She quickly replied that she fell from a height while picking a flower. The boy asked what kind of flower it was. The girl, in her wheelchair, brought it over and placed it behind his ear. She said it was that very flower. The boy asked if she had really suffered because of it and if it must have hurt terribly. But the heroine said everything was fine. After all, everyone around her was trying to heal her. That day, her bodyguard was Linux, who sat beside her. Then the girl asked if Ragnar had always been alone and if he had no family. The boy said he had an older brother who told him he'd come for him someday. The heroine immediately thought that if his brother really wanted to take him, he wouldn't have left him in a place like that. She asked how long ago that had happened. The boy said it was when he was very little. The information the girl gained from the game was that Ragnar didn't know his exact age. That's why he didn't know when his brother had told him all this. After a while, the heroine said they'd end the game for today. Suddenly, a boy approached and asked if they were done. He laughed and said that meant he'd arrived just in time. The main heroine and Linux immediately looked over and saw their older brother Ricardo standing there. As always, he had a wide grin and asked if they'd had fun today. In his hands, he held a strange sack. He added that he now had a question for Daphne. He smiled even more sweetly and said that inside his bag was something valuable for the girl. That's why he had a question. What could it be? Inside were some rather odd items. He immediately pulled them out of his bag and sat down near the cage. Everyone watched closely as he took out a small bottle and said that if they uncorked the bottle with the green liquid, they'd need to do something next. He added that they needed to pour the liquid from the bottle onto the twig lying in front of him. Then he said it was magic, but the twig just lay on the ground, and the main heroine looked at it, not understanding what had happened. Suddenly, Ricardo approached her and handed her the twig. He said that Daphne needed to do something with it. The girl asked if it really had to be her. Then the boy started scattering some magical dust around. He said, of course, it had to be the girl because she'd manage it, calling her dear to him. A few moments later, he spoke again, saying he'd drawn something. He asked if the girl could trace the drawing with the stick. The heroine reluctantly agreed to do it. Lennox held her in his arms while she traced the drawing her brother had made. She thought it felt like they were just playing. After a while, Ricardo said it was simply wonderful. He added that now the girl needed to place the twig in the very center. The boy was blocking Ragnar's view, and Ragnar thought he couldn't see well. The girl finished her task rather quickly. Ricardo said that thanks to Daphne, they'd completed all this work so fast. Linux said their little sister had indeed sped up the process significantly. He noted that her other brother should thank her for it. Ricardo, in turn, thanked his little sister. The girl looked at all this skeptically. She thought, so this is how he behaves with children, though she knew she hadn't been a child inside for a long time, only on the outside. Suddenly, he clapped his hands and said he wanted a little attention. Then he touched the circle the girl had drawn and said he'd show them something amazing. Right after that, the boy began using his magical abilities. At first, the circle glowed red, then turned entirely blue. Seeing this, the main heroine asked what it was. Ricardo stood up and asked if it was really that curious. The girl said, of course, it was very interesting to her. The boy wondered if he should tell her everything. The heroine quickly said that since she'd helped with the drawing, she had the right to know. Hearing this, the boy was even more pleased and said he didn't know she could be so sharp. The heroine wondered if she'd just made herself look like a fool in front of them. A few moments later, the older brother said he'd been observing Ragnar for a week. After that time, he was convinced all the spells had worn off him. Then he said that after a brief discussion, had decided to connect the house's hall to this place. Had done it by distorting space and time. So, the same circle drawn in the forest was also drawn at their home. Hearing this, Ragnar asked why teleportation circles were needed for that. The girl looked at the boy in surprise at his words. She wondered what he knew about teleportation circles. She was also curious why he seemed so upset hearing about it. Suddenly, their eyes met, and the girl felt awkward. A few moments later, the sad boy suddenly smiled, his cheeks turning red again. The girl wondered if he'd cheered up again after seeing her. Suddenly, her older brother Linux approached and asked if she wanted to take a closer look at it all. The girl smiled and said, of course, she did. At that moment, as she tried to leave, Ragnar reached out from the cage and grabbed her hand. The girl looked at him, and he had a rather frightened expression. She wondered if he was worried about all this. Ricardo, sitting near the circle, said it had gotten quite cold lately. That's why Daphne shouldn't keep going back and forth. Still, he couldn't just forbid her from seeing Ragnar, so had decided to connect this place to the mansion. Hearing this, the heroine was very happy about these actions. While everyone chatted joyfully about it, a loud bang came from the cage. They immediately turned their attention there, wondering what it was. The boy stood there, and it was clear had been hit on the cheek. It seemed he'd probably bumped into one of the cage walls. Suddenly, he said he couldn't believe it wasn't a dream. The main heroine rushed to him, took his cheek, and asked if it hurt a lot. The boy smiled as she approached and said it didn't hurt at all. He added that, on the contrary, it was wonderful. He also said that now he could spend more time with Daphne. The heroine was shocked by his actions and words, even blushing a little. Suddenly, Linux approached and said the girl had been standing for a bit. He said they should first take care of the boy's injury. The girl said everything was fine and, of course, they should do it. Then the boy approached Ragnar with healing ointment and said had scared them a little. The boy laughed even harder at this and didn't reply. Ricardo, sitting nearby, asked what was so funny about the situation. The main heroine felt a bit embarrassed by it all. She immediately thought, could the main hero really be such a complete fool? It seemed that way to her because had been acting quite strangely lately. Late that night at home, she thought it just couldn't be true. In the novel she remembered, he had a bad temper. Even as he grew closer to the heroine, he constantly argued with her to that extent. That night, the girl reached the circle that connected the forest to their home. Having gotten there, she thought how great it was that she'd made it unnoticed. The lullaby her matron sang was so warm that she almost fell asleep, but because of the plan she had in mind, she forced herself to stay awake. At that moment, the girl stepped into the circle, knowing teleportation was about to happen. She thought Ragnar would probably be surprised by her arrival since he wasn't expecting a visit. Smiling, she wondered how he'd react. Just a few moments later, the girl teleported to the forest where the cage stood. There, she immediately noticed it was quite dark. Looking at the oil lamp, she realized even its light wasn't on. Then she remembered it was late at night, so Ragnar must be asleep. Inside the cage, nothing was visible at all. Panic started to rise in the heroine, and she thought she absolutely hated the dark. Because that darkness was like the kind carried by the people who hated her. She thought she'd escaped it, but the memories still haunted her. Then she wondered what she should do, feeling as if the darkness might swallow her whole. At that moment, she thought it was devouring her. Due to all the fear, she immediately felt her hands trembling. She thought she desperately wanted someone to help her in this situation. Suddenly, the girl noticed a purple light in the distance. She was surprised and wondered what it was. She thought it might be moonlight. But just a few moments later, she realized it wasn't that at all. It was the light from Ragnar's eyes. The boy saw the girl and asked if it was really Daphne coming to him. The main heroine thought that the beautiful violet eyes of this boy shone quite brightly. It was as if they were dispelling the darkness around them. The girl immediately turned to Ragnar and said his eyes were very beautiful. She added that they might even be more beautiful than the moon in the sky. The boy asked if she'd really come here in secret from her family. The heroine confirmed it was true. The boy asked why she'd done it, wondering if it was because she missed him. Hearing this, the girl thought, where had he picked up such phrases? She figured he'd probably learned them from Ricardo. The heroine said she'd actually come to give him something. The boy asked what she was holding. The girl handed it to him, and he saw it was hot chocolate. He was overjoyed and practically glowed with happiness. The girl asked if he liked it. The boy said, of course, he did, and asked if Daphne liked it too. He wondered if she also wanted some delicious hot chocolate or not. She hesitated at first, then said she didn't actually like hot chocolate. The boy was shocked by this and looked at her in surprise. He asked if she hadn't said it was her favorite drink, wondering if she didn't like it anymore. The heroine said it was true, and Ragnar could drink it calmly. She noted it was cold, so she suggested they cover up with the blanket she'd just pulled out. Moments later, they sat across from each other, the boy drinking hot chocolate while the girl watched him. He thought it was delicious in his mouth. She smiled and asked if it tasted good to him. He replied that, of course, it did. The main heroine thought she came and played with him every morning, and at night she secretly brought him tasty food. If they kept spending time like this, he'd grow more dependent on her. She wondered if that was true or not. If it was, it would be very hard for him to hate her. Then she thought it was all just perfect. After all, she was slowly getting closer to fulfilling her plan. Suddenly, the boy turned to the girl and asked if she didn't like sweets. She confirmed that was the case. Her companion asked why that was. The heroine thought there was nothing secret about it, so she could easily tell him. She said she didn't like them because they were too sweet for her. Ragnar said if they were too sweet, what was the big deal? The girl added that she was afraid she'd melt along with the candy. This answer greatly surprised the boy. The girl thought it was almost true. She was scared that something sweet might make her forget everything, like marshmallows in hot chocolate. Forget what had happened to her before and how everyone considered her some kind of evil just because she was born the child of a villainess. That's why she thought her will to live might melt away at that moment. Hearing such a strange reason, the boy started laughing. The heroine asked why he was laughing. He said there was nothing wrong with it, she just acted like a child. The girl asked if she really seemed like a child to him. Ragnar added that it was true because she worried about melting. He asked if he should say how childish that was, adding that she was so cute at the same time. The main heroine was shocked by this and thought, does this kid really think she's a child? She turned around and said she was leaving, but her companion immediately grew sad and asked her not to go. He quickly grabbed her hand and asked Daphne not to be mad at him. He smiled sweetly and said he'd hold her so tightly she couldn't melt. He also said she'd trusted him, so he'd always be there to protect her, and he smiled even more sweetly. Hearing this, the main heroine blushed even more. She thought it was definitely winter, but Ragnar's smile bloomed like a spring flower. Then she said she wouldn't actually melt and called him silly. At the same time, she thought everyone had wished her dead because she was just the daughter of a villainess. She wondered if Ragnar would protect her when he found out whose daughter she was. Sometime after all these events, the main heroine visited the boy again with her older brothers. Linux looked at the sprouting plants and said the grass was slowly growing. That could only mean spring was coming soon. The heroine asked if it was really happening already. The girl thought 2 months had passed since she first came here, and it had been a month since she met Ragnar. The boy also asked if spring was really coming soon, noting it still felt cold, like winter. The main heroine was completely sure Ragnar was hiding something from her lately. When he was alone, he sometimes looked busy with something. But the moment the heroine approached him, he quickly hid whatever it was as soon as she got closer. Ricardo, sitting nearby, started daydreaming and talking about what they could do this spring. He asked if they should go for a walk with Daphne. Hearing this, Ragnar said he wanted to walk with Daphne too. Suddenly, he approached the cage, and it rattled. At that moment, he felt unbearable pain in his hand. Seeing this, the main heroine asked the boy what had happened to him. He, in turn, writhed in pain and clutched his hand. The girl immediately noticed a bloody cut on his hand. She took Ragnar's hand and asked where it had come from, but the boy said it was nothing serious. Linux quickly stepped in to help treat the boy's wound. He noted it looked like one of the bowls had broken. He asked the boy if he'd cut himself while washing it, but the boy didn't answer him. The heroine also asked why Ragnar hadn't told her about it. After all, it must have hurt a lot at that moment. The main hero said he just didn't want to cause extra trouble. Then he smiled and said at least he'd have a scar now, and that was wonderful. Hearing this, the girl was very surprised and asked what nonsense he was talking about. Since when was having a scar something wonderful? Seeing the girl's reaction, the boy wondered why Daphne was so upset. Had he said something wrong? He then said scars were marks of distinction and something to be proud of. He knew that's what everyone had told him. The main heroine and her brothers were absolutely shocked by these words. The heroine shuddered at this. She immediately thought it was unbelievable. Could it really be true? She was very curious about who had fed him such nonsense. After a brief moment of thought, the girl turned to Ragnar and asked if it was the people who beat him that day who had told him this. The boy clearly heard the question but just lowered his eyes and didn't answer. His behavior made the main heroine very sad. From his reaction, she realized it must be true. She understood it was just wrong. He should be outraged by it. Then she wondered if he had just kept enduring it all. She recalled that she knew how hard it could be to stand up to someone sometimes. Still, even if that was the case, she needed to show him. The main heroine desperately wanted Ragnar to be truly happy. A moment later, she took the boy's hand and told him not to see his scars as marks of distinction. Those people had fed him complete nonsense. How could they distinguish him if they only brought pain? She told him not to think it was normal to get hurt. The boy was surprised to hear this and asked why that was. He didn't understand what was so bad about it. The girl said it could upset the people close to him. Ragnar asked if it upset her too then. The heroine said it did, and now she felt bad. The boy immediately wondered if he'd upset Daphne with his actions. At that moment, Lennox approached the heroine and picked her up. He said it was time to go since the sun would set soon, and they needed to head home. They also needed to get bandages to treat Ragnar's wound. Before leaving, the girl turned to the boy. She asked him to promise her he wouldn't hide such things anymore. After all, she didn't want him to feel bad. The boy immediately thought he understood. Daphne was just worried about him. He smiled and said he promised her that. The girl and her brothers smiled, but then they still felt sad. The heroine realized that even after his words, she felt uneasy. She looked at the boy and wondered where Ragnar had lived before. After all, it must have been a place where he couldn't show his feelings. A place where they taught him to fight but didn't show him the beauty of flowers. A place where they turned children into killers. The main heroine thought this wouldn't do. She realized she'd need to ask the boy to tell her more about his life. At that moment, she decided she'd sneak to him that night and ask him about it. And so, late that night, it happened. The boy asked if she was really asking where he'd lived before. The girl said it was true, and it was very important for her to know. The main hero said with a heavy heart that it was a pretty scary place. The walls of that place were filled with people's screams. He was constantly beaten there, and people were easily killed. He thought maybe it was because of his eyes, since many mocked and hated him for them. They told him he'd be allowed to see his older brother if he killed. Because of that, he refused, so they forced him with magic. Then the boy smiled and said that after all that, Daphne had saved him. The main heroine thought she'd expected to hear something like this. It really was a horrible place. Suddenly, the boy turned to the girl and asked if he could ask her something. The girl asked what he wanted. He then asked if she was afraid of dark places. She wondered when he'd noticed that. The heroine thought she'd already given herself away, so excuses wouldn't work now. She immediately told the boy he was right, she was scared of being in the dark. With sadness on her face, she added that she feared it might one day draw her in. She was also scared because her father, who had mercilessly abandoned her, was completely consumed by that darkness. That's why, whenever she saw something dark, she remembered him, and it always frightened her. Then the boy took her hand and asked if he could ask something else. The girl said, of course, he could. He immediately asked why her father had abandoned her. The girl wondered if she should say it was because she was the daughter of a villainess. Thoughts raced through her mind about what Ragnar would think when he learned the truth. He hadn't even seen flowers, but what if he somehow knew about the villainess? She wondered if he'd hate her like everyone else once he knew. Then she decided she had to do it right now. After all her thoughts, she turned to Ragnar. At that moment, tears welled up in her eyes. She thought that if he rejected her now, it wouldn't hurt as much. Then she said her father had abandoned her because he had a reason. It happened because she was the daughter of a villainess who deserved death, and that meant she deserved death along with her mother. The heroine looked at the boy, wondering what expression he had. She couldn't see it because tears blurred her eyes. She thought she wanted to tell him everything, but it wasn't that simple. She wondered if only her eyes were like everyone else's. Now she was terrified to look at the boy in front of her, but mentally she begged him not to be like everyone else. The boy immediately turned to Daphne. He said he knew her mum was a villainess, but he didn't understand what was wrong with that. He asked if she was to blame for it. The main hero took her hand and asked why anyone should hate her. He added that Daphne didn't deserve death at all. The girl kept crying and said many people still hated her. The boy told her to stop crying. He wouldn't let others say such things anymore, and that was because she was now under his protection. The girl asked if that was really true, even if she was the daughter of a villainess. The main hero immediately said it didn't matter at all. After all, she'd saved him. He said that even if the whole world was against her, he'd always love and protect her. The main heroine immediately thought that many had hated and bullied her. Even her memories of her past life didn't always save her. In that awful place, there was no one she could trust. But now it was different. There was someone ready to protect her. The girl sat beside him, holding hands, and was very happy about it all. Suddenly, the boy asked if he could ask her one more question. She said, of course, he could. He asked if Lennox and Ricardo were her family. The girl was about to answer, but the boy said that meant he wasn't part of it. She immediately said that was true. The main hero quickly asked if that meant he was her friend or not. He blushed a little and thought of something more. The girl hadn't expected such a direct question and paused to think. After a brief moment, she said something like that. The boy asked sadly if he'd gotten it wrong. The heroine said he hadn't, and he was even more than a friend. The main heroine then thought that, due to her complicated life, she'd never had friends. Her mentor Uline had stabbed her in the back, the kids at the orphanage were just dumb, and the director deserved revenge too. Now she realized this talk of friendship made her a bit uncomfortable. But she thought that if she remembered her past life, she'd had great friends. If it mattered to him so much, she'd tell him. She turned to Ragnar and, with a smile, said he was her best friend. She wanted to add something else. But suddenly, she bent over sharply. Seeing this, the main hero asked what was wrong with her. The girl started gasping heavily and grabbed her throat. She thought, why had this happened so suddenly? She felt her heart hurt terribly. It was getting very cold, and she couldn't breathe. The boy rushed closer to her, asking what was happening. The girl didn't answer and collapsed to the floor. The boy tried to reach her, but she was already unconscious. Some time later, a loud crash echoed through the house where the main heroine lived. Ricardo was sitting in his room and immediately noticed it. He asked what that strange sound was. He wondered if someone was making noise at night and got up to check what was happening. He also thought it might be coming from above him. For a moment he panicked as Matron's and Daphne's rooms were up there. As he ran out of his room, he saw Lennox. had come out to check the noise too and asked his brother if he'd heard it from upstairs. Ricardo confirmed it was true. He added that there was nothing wrong with the magic or barriers. But if the magic wasn't destroyed, maybe something heavy had fallen. After all, even Daphne could have fallen out of bed, so they needed to hurry and check what had happened. The boys reached their matron's room and saw her there. Ricardo immediately told the woman he was glad she was okay and asked where Daphne was. Suddenly, they heard someone calling out to Daphne from another part of the room. It was the main hero, tearfully begging the girl to open her eyes. He shouted for someone to help him, terrified that the girl might die. Somehow, the boy had escaped the cage and carried her through the teleport to her home on his own. Everyone rushed to him and the girl. The brothers asked what was going on. The woman was shocked, feeling a strong favor in the girl. She thought it hadn't been long since her last illness, so it wasn't surprising. Seeing them take the girl, Ragnar asked what was wrong with her. Was she dying? The woman told Lennox to follow her. She also told Ricardo to join them, but a bit later. The main hero was very worried about the girl, but Ricardo stopped him. He said she'd be fine since her mum was with her now. He added that he thought the boy had suffered a lot too, so they should step aside and talk calmly. The boy asked what step aside meant. Then he said he didn't want to go back to that prison. He begged to stay here at least until Daphne woke up. Ricardo told him not to worry, wouldn't take him back there. He said they'd better treat his wounds now. Ragnar said he still wanted to be near Daphne. Ricardo replied that he'd check him over first, then take him to her. After all, if his wounds weren't treated, Daphne would worry about him anyway. A short while later, the boy finished healing the kid with his magic. He said he was done and asked what had happened to them, but the boy didn't answer and sat silently. Ricardo said he understood. Then he asked if, since they hadn't removed the magic circle, Daphne had been coming to play every night. The boy said it happened because he wanted to spend more time with her. Ricardo said they'd let him know when the girl woke up. He looked at the boy and thought he was quite interesting. If he could escape the prison, why had he stayed there all this time? Then Ricardo stood up and offered Ragnar his hand. He said he needed to get some medicine for Daphne. He suggested the boy come with him to check on her condition together. The main hero immediately thought this boy was Daphne's brother. He also remembered that this person had scared him a lot before. Ricardo asked what was wrong and suggested they go now. But the boy kept thinking he didn't feel scared around this guy now. He wasn't blaming him either. After all, the boy had even used magic to stay near the girl. Still, Ragnar took his hand, and they went together. The main hero wondered how he'd treat him if he were his brother too. Ricardo asked if the boy wanted to bring Daphne some cocoa when she woke up. Some time after all this, the main heroine finally woke up. As soon as she did, she felt her throat hurt terribly. She asked someone to give her water. A boy handed her water, and she thanked him. Then she carefully looked to see who had given her the glass. But then she saw Ragnar in front of her and was shocked. She immediately asked what he was doing here. The boy said her mum had let him stay until she got better. The main heroine asked if that meant he'd brought her here. She also called him a fool. The boy thought he'd wanted to escape the prison long ago, but he kept putting it off because of the girl. Then the main hero said he thought she'd gotten sick because of him and apologized for it. The girl asked why he was apologizing. She'd wanted to see her friend all this time. The boy broke into a wide smile and asked what she'd just said. Was he really her friend? Overjoyed by the news, the boy jumped to hug the girl. She, in turn, said she'd call him Rara now. At that moment, the head of the trading guild entered the room. Seeing the girl awake, she immediately rushed to her and hugged her. She said she'd finally woken up. She added that she'd been so worried because the girl hadn't woken up for a whole week. Suddenly, a smiling Lennox entered and told their matron not to scare her like that. He added that their uncle had been very surprised by it all. The girl asked about an uncle in surprise. The boy said it was their uncle who'd helped them. After a brief conversation, the woman said their Daphne had finally woken up safely. She asked the boy if he minded returning to their talk. The woman addressed the boy, calling him Ragnar Sherbold. She asked if he could have left the prison anytime. Why had he stayed silent about it? The boy said Daphne might have been scared if Head left. That would have happened because Head tried to hurt her before. It was obvious those actions would shock her. Hearing this, the heroine was surprised and thought she hadn't known that. The Head said she understood, but then why had he left that night with Daphne? She added that if she'd known he could escape the cage. Ragnar said it happened because Daphne was more important to him. He didn't want her to get hurt. Hearing this answer, the woman smiled and said she understood. She added that she wanted to thank him for his help. Originally, she'd planned to find Berthold Sherbold, but from the stories she'd heard, it became clear his older brother wasn't a good person. The heroine pointed out to her friend that Head said his brother was going to come for him. The boy looked away and apologized, saying it was just a lie. His brother had said He'd come for him only if he was a good boy. But it turned out he didn't come because the boy didn't keep his promises. Because of that, if he went back, they'd surely kill him. Hearing this, Lena Irina was shocked. Suddenly, the head of the trading guild joined the conversation. She said they'd need to find a place for Ragnar to stay. She smiled sweetly and said, by the way, there was a guest room free in their house. She asked the boy what he thought about it. The heroine was overjoyed at her matron's words, and the boy's eyes lit up. He immediately said he wanted to stay here. The main hero jumped up and asked if the woman really didn't mind. She smiled sweetly again and asked if she looked like a liar. She added that He'd earned it, so he shouldn't be shy. Then the heroine joyfully hugged her friend and said she was so happy about this. The matron smiled and said how nice it was to be a child. She turned to Daphne and said it seemed she now had a friend too. The main heroine smiled as the boy hugged her even tighter. She told Rara it tickled a bit. Lennox asked what kind of nickname Rara was for the boy. While they had fun upstairs, Ricardo approached the stairs and called out to everyone. He shouted joyfully that it was lunchtime. The head of the trading guild asked the boy if he wanted to join them. He smiled and said he was all for it. Then they all went downstairs, and as a result, Ragnar became a member of their family. The food on the table looked very appealing to the boy. Sitting at the table, Ricardo said it was so delicious he couldn't help himself. Lennox told him he just wasn't pacing himself. Seeing this, the woman told them to stop arguing with each other. The main heroine watched closely as her friend finally ate well. She smiled and thought it was a truly wonderful day. That same day, it was already night. The head of the trading guild walked through the mansion's hallway. She looked at the spot where the circle had been and saw everything was fine. It seemed Ricardo had finally dealt with the magical passage to the forest. The woman thought that though Ricardo had handled the forest passage, she couldn't calm down because of Daphne's health. She'd been beside herself and couldn't sleep. She sat by the sleeping girl, watching her. Then the matron lifted the blanket and looked at her daughter's little legs. She thought she still couldn't walk, and it deeply upset her. She knew Daphne didn't want to interact with the outside world. After all, her home was far away. She'd tried every kind of medicine and magic, but nothing had worked. The head kissed the girl and thought she could only trust that boy now. She immediately thought of a white-haired man. The next day, the main hero changed out of his tattered clothes. Suddenly, he noticed Daphne and said her dress was very cute today. He had a small box behind his back that looked like a gift. Hearing this, the girl asked if it was true. She smiled and said they could finally switch to spring clothes, but the boy kept saying she looked very pretty like this. The heroine thanked him for the warm words. Then the girl thought it seemed Ragnar had gotten used to the new house, had started learning to write with the main heroine. He also helped Lennox. And he helped Ricardo, learning to cook with him. Lately, had been making cocoa less sweet. The heroine sat with a smile, thinking she was glad his relationships with all their family members were improving. Suddenly, the boy turned to her and said he had something for her. He handed her a gift tied with a ribbon and told her to hold it. The heroine unwrapped the lovely gift and saw a scarf and mittens inside. She was very surprised and asked if Head made them for her himself. The main hero said Head wanted to give them to her for a long time, but he wasn't skilled at it, so Head only finished them now. Lennox had helped him with it too. Hearing this, the girl asked if he hadn't been working on alchemy with him all this time. The boy said that was true, but had started knitting long ago. For some reason, he looked quite downcast. The main heroine suddenly remembered the strange things he'd been doing when she visited him. Now she understood he'd been secretly making this in the prison. Looking at the items, she saw uneven stitches and different lengths, and winter had long since ended. Still, the girl was happy with the gift and smiled. Then she turned to the boy, and he quickly turned to look at her. At that moment, the girl put on the mittens and wrapped the scarf around her neck. Smiling, she said it was still cold at night and in the morning, so she could wear these things until it got warm. She asked the boy how she looked wearing them. He blushed and smiled joyfully. The girl kept saying she really liked them, especially since he'd chosen her favorite color. With embarrassment and now tears of joy in his eyes, he said they suited Daphne so well. While the main characters discussed this, a man rushed through the corridors of the same mansion they were in. A few moments later, he flung open the door where the children were. Ragnar didn't recognize the man and immediately shielded the girl with his body. He asked the mysterious stranger who he was. The mysterious man didn't answer. It was clear he was exhausted from running and slowly started moving closer to the children. The main hero got scared and told the man not to come near the girl. He kept shielding her with his body. Hearing this, the man said he wasn't a bad person. Then he turned to Daphne and said he'd finally managed to see her. The girl was shocked after the mysterious stranger addressed her. She wondered if this man knew her. The white-haired man knelt beside the girl and said he was her father. Tears welled up in his eyes. The main heroine was even more shocked by this and wondered what this man was talking about. Ragnar was also shocked and asked what nonsense he was spouting. How could he be her father? The man started sobbing and shouted that he'd finally reunited with his daughter. Suddenly, the main hero asked her if she knew this guy would come to them. The girl, surprised, said she didn't. The man said they didn't realize how cruel their words were. The girl thought his eyes were golden, just like hers. She immediately thought that in this country, that color was mostly typical of nobility. That meant this man was likely a noble. She hoped it was just a coincidence. Suddenly, the head of the trading guild rushed into the room where they all were. She ran quickly and flung the door open. Everyone immediately turned to see who had burst in. The woman looked furious and addressed the mysterious man, calling him Exilius. He, with tears in his eyes, said it was unbelievable. Is this really clear? After that, he moved toward the woman, still crying. He stopped and said she looked wonderful, calling her dear. The main heroine and hero were shocked hearing this. The girl wondered if this uncle was her new mom's boyfriend. The head immediately turned to the man. She asked if he remembered what she'd told him recently. The man asked his dear what she meant. The woman swung at him and said he should come to her first when he arrived or returned home. Then they had a family argument, and the heroine and her friend were shocked to see it. The matron kept shouting that he should have done what she'd told him before. Exilius said it was just a very urgent matter. He said being greeted like this was awful, but the woman kept kicking him, calling him a scoundrel. At that moment, the heroine's older brothers, Lennox and Ricardo, appeared. Lennox said this is what happens when that guy doesn't listen to her. Suddenly, the girl stopped him and addressed him. The boy asked what she wanted. The girl asked if this was the crybaby her brother had told her about earlier. He asked how she'd figured it out. Ricardo said it was probably because had started sobbing right away. Exilius, with tears in his eyes, asked Claire if this wasn't too much. He was very curious how she could have raised their daughter alone and in secret. The woman immediately asked what he was talking about. The man wondered if it was because of her health. He asked if she was afraid he might harm her. The head asked if he didn't understand anything at all. She called him an idiot and shouted that this girl wasn't his daughter. The man was shocked and asked what she was saying. Then Exilius sat down and kept saying she was his secret daughter. At that moment, Lennox approached the main heroine and started wheeling her away. He smiled and said he thought their mum needed to have a serious talk with this uncle, so it'd be better if they went for a little walk now. The girl's mum approached and said to her daughter that had probably surprised her a lot. She asked if she was right. The girl said it wasn't quite like that. She added that she felt more sad than anything. After all, this uncle had cried so hard that her heart ached for him. He looked so pitiful at the same time. That's why she'd wanted to comfort him so badly then. The man sat quietly, listening to the girl, and kept crying. After that, Lennox took the girl for a walk, and the main hero went with them too. The man thought this girl was really so sweet. She wasn't just beautiful on the outside but had a bright soul too. At that moment, the girl turned, and their eyes met. A short while later, the head of the trading guild was left alone with Exilius. The man asked his companion if she wouldn't tell him who the girl's father really was. The woman said, of course, she wouldn't, and he started crying again. He thought that 5 or 6 years ago, before leaving for the outskirts, had spent one night with Claire. That's why he thought this child could be his. Also, the girl's eyes were golden, just like his. Such a beautiful eye color was rare among commoners. That's why he thought she was his child. Then he said he wouldn't ask about her father or other details about the girl anymore. Hearing this, the woman immediately thanked him. Exilius said she'd called him for some urgent matter. He wondered if it had to do with Daphne's legs. The head confirmed he was right. The girl had injured them in an accident, but she still couldn't walk. The man asked if even Lennox and Ricardo couldn't heal her. After all, he knew they were among the best in magic and alchemy in the entire empire, maybe even the whole continent. The woman said she'd tried so many things, but nothing had worked in 4 months. It happened even though she'd delayed a bit, since it was better to keep the girl hidden for now. The man said it seemed she'd called him because the only option left was healing at the temple, or had he misunderstood? The head of the trading guild said sadly that if this didn't work, the girl might never walk again. She immediately asked the man to help her. Seeing how upset she was, he took her hands. He firmly said he'd do everything possible to help. He asked her to just trust him. The woman immediately smiled at him happily. The man thought he'd even abandoned his family for the person he loved. A week after those events, Lennox was brushing the main heroine's hair. The girl said they were going to the temple to heal her legs. She asked her older brother if he'd come with them. He replied that he wouldn't. The paladin would pick her up today. The main heroine and hero asked together who this paladin was. The older brother said it was true, and Daphne and Ragnar had known him for a while. The girl was very surprised hearing this and wondered who this person was. Suddenly, someone knocked on the door of the room they were in. The girl shouted for Ricardo to come in. At that moment, a man walked in with a smile, apologized, and said it wasn't him. He added that he assumed the girl was ready. They could finally head to the Ammon temple. This man was the paladin, named Alexius Chenard. The heroine and her friend were shocked by his splendid clothes. The girl thought, could this crybaby really be a paladin? She was very surprised and thought he'd surely noticed her shock. She tapped her little cheeks and told herself to pull it together. The man saw this and was a bit surprised. Lennox approached the girl and asked if she'd wear the scarf and mittens as usual. She immediately said, of course, she would. Hearing this, the older brother placed the items on her lap. He told her not to forget the mittens until it got warmer. The scarf would serve instead of a blanket. Then the man asked if the girl was finally ready. After that, he started wheeling the heroine out. She turned to her friend and said she'd love to go with him. The boy smiled and said the feeling was mutual. The heroine thought Ragnar had no choice but to trouble others, just like she did. She felt sad, wondering what if someone found out she was the daughter of a villainess. She really wanted her legs healed soon. It hurt so much to see Ragnar worrying about her all this time. A short while later, they all stepped outside. A carriage was waiting for them, ready to depart, and the head of the trading guild stood in front of it. Seeing the girl, the woman immediately told Daphne to come to her. She held a strange headpiece in her hands. Then they wheeled the girl to her, and the woman put it on her. She said this headpiece would cover her face. The girl thanked her mom for it. She thought everything would surely be fine now. A moment later, they seated the heroine in the carriage. Her mom said the temple wasn't accepting other guests today, so she didn't need to worry. Her best friend turned to her and said to come back to them soon. A couple of minutes later, the carriage set off for its destination. The heroine turned her head and saw her whole family waving at her with smiles, wishing her a good trip. Seeing this, the heroine smiled and felt very happy. She thought she was so grateful to them all for supporting her. With the courage they'd given her, she could boldly move forward. Some time later, the carriage with the main heroine and the paladin reached their destination. When they stepped out, a girl greeted them. She smiled and said Sir Chenard had finally arrived. Other people were also happy to see him and said he looked great. Hearing this, the man greeted them all with a smile. The girl saw this and thought this crybaby uncle was definitely a paladin now. She could tell by how the others addressed him. She also thought that at least they wouldn't kick her out of here. The people greeting the paladin looked at the girl, wondering who this child was. The man kept leading the girl inside. She carefully observed the place and thought it was some kind of sacred site. Suddenly, they reached a locked door guarded by two men. One of them told the man they'd finally arrived. He added that the Holy One was already waiting inside. The man said that was great and asked them to open the door. They obeyed and began unlocking the huge door. The girl peeked through the crack and noticed a very bright light coming from it. Inside the room stood a massive statue, and below it sat a woman. Seeing the new guests, she immediately noticed them. Then she greeted Sir Chenard. The man smiled and said to the Holy One that it had been a while. She asked what kind of joke that was after all. She'd seen him just yesterday. The main heroine looked at the woman and wondered if this was the Holy One. She immediately noticed the child. She asked if this was the child Head wanted to ask about. As she leaned toward the girl, the heroine greeted her right away. The paladin said she'd injured her leg in an accident. Had been told they'd tried every kind of treatment, from magic to various medicines. The woman asked just how sick this child was then. She added that she understood and said they'd start the treatment right away. Then she clasped her hands together, and light began to pour from them. The woman directed the light with her efforts toward the girl's injured legs. The heroine saw this, was slightly surprised, and wondered what kind of power it was. A short while later, the girl felt her legs growing warmer. Then the woman stood and said she'd just tried something today. She turned to the girl and asked if she could try moving them. The main heroine, hearing this, immediately agreed. Everyone in the room began to worry intensely, hoping everything would work out. The girl struggled to do something and move her legs. At the same time, she silently begged her legs to move even just a little, and then, after a short while, her leg finally twitched. The paladin and the Holy One saw this and immediately rejoiced. The woman, with a smile on her face, announced that they had succeeded, though, she added, her leg was still trembling slightly. The Holy One continued, saying that it would require a lot of effort, but she could still help the girl. The heroine heard this and asked what she should do then. Her interlocutor went on, saying that many girls could indeed be healed. Hearing these words, the main heroine immediately blossomed into a smile. She thought to herself that she had never known God's mercy, and yet, at this very moment, it had reached her too. At the same time, outside the room where the heroine and the others were, interesting things were happening. Someone approached the guard and greeted her, calling her Vicky. The woman immediately noticed that it was His Highness who had approached. The young man pointed out to her that the High Duke Exilius must be inside. He added that he simply needed to meet with him. The girl wanted to respond but hesitated. The young man, realizing they weren't eager to let him in, grew a little angry. He declared that he was the crown prince of the Clemens Empire and asked if the guards dared to block his path. At that same moment, the heroine turned toward the entrance door. She did so because she heard some strange noises coming from there. She immediately thought to herself that something odd seemed to be happening. The paladin noticed the girl acting strangely and asked if she was feeling unwell. The girl smiled and assured him she was fine. She explained that she had just heard some noise, which was why she turned around. Suddenly, the Holy One addressed the man. She asked if they could speak privately for just a moment. He replied that, of course, they could. Alexius immediately leaned toward the girl and asked if she'd wait a little. He assured her not to worry, as no one could enter this room. Then he handed her a lollipop and told her to hold on to it, saying it was lemon-flavored. After that, he went off to talk with the Holy One, waving to the girl and promising he'd be back before she could finish the candy. The heroine waved back and said everything was fine. A moment later, she was left alone in this vast room. After that, she began to examine it closely. She immediately thought that, as the man had said, it seemed no one could really enter here. Then she realized that, if that were true, she could finally take off her hat. It was terribly uncomfortable to wear. A moment later, she removed it and declared that things were much better without it. Right after that, she thought she could finally look around, but at that very moment, the heroine heard the entrance door to the room swing open. Turning her head, the girl saw a small boy walking in. The main heroine didn't understand what was happening. She wondered who he was and what he could be. She was also very curious whether this boy knew her. Then she saw him staring into her eyes and pointing at her. The boy greeted her and said he had a question for her. The girl was even more shocked by his words. She thought she needed to leave immediately, but fear kept her rooted to the spot. After just a short amount of time, it was too late. The mysterious boy had already come closer to her. As he approached, he immediately asked if she had come with the Great Duke. The main heroine asked him what he was talking about. Her interlocutor began staring intently into her eyes. He thought to himself that she had golden eyes, and to him, that could only mean one thing. Then he said he'd ask her differently. He declared that she must be the daughter of the Great Duke. The girl was once again shocked by his blunt questions. While these intriguing events unfolded in that room, the Holy One had secluded herself with the man. She told him about Daphne's current condition. The man asked if it was really true that Daphne was in such poor health. The woman smiled calmly and said they just needed to calm down first before discussing everything. The man grew wary and pointed out that the girl was left alone in there, so he asked her to speak quickly. His interlocutor immediately thought how impatient he was. Then she said that, from her perspective, she was confident the girl would get better. The man, surprised, asked who would get better. The Holy One, astonished, said that of course she meant Daphne. She explained that the girl's body was different from other children's. All she could say was that it required a tremendous amount of energy. She also noted that this was how she healed ordinary people's wounds. From this, it followed that if the girl had enough energy, she could fully recover. That was what the girl needed, but there was something else. The woman pointed out that her condition required urgent intervention. However, it couldn't be healed quickly, as the new energy needed time to build up in her body. The man asked what they should do in that case. She continued, saying the treatment would take about 2 weeks. If they rushed, all the divine power would simply be absorbed and vanish. The Holy One noted that this girl had been in treatment for over a year, but now, she could definitely recover. The paladin let out a relieved sigh and said that was simply wonderful. Then she looked into her companion's eyes and thought that Daphne's eyes were exactly like Serchainid's. She also noticed that her hair was like Benedicta's. The woman also recalled that Serchainid's story of unrequited love was known throughout the capital. From all this, she concluded that Daphne was likely his daughter. A moment later, she stood up and told the man she would take full responsibility for the girl's treatment. Because of this, she asked him to pass all this information to Benedetto. The man asked if she meant Chloe. At that moment, he wondered how this woman had figured out that Daphne was Chloe's daughter. He also thought that they couldn't let others keep thinking this, so he said he thought it was some kind of misunderstanding. As he was saying this, he heard Daphne screaming from beyond the room's door. He immediately noticed it and stood up to see what had happened. When he stepped out of the room where he had been secluded with the Holy One, he was shocked. Standing before the main heroine was His Highness, the boy. He was asking the girl what she meant by no and shouting at her to answer him right now. The boy aggressively asked why the Duke's daughter had golden eyes while he didn't. The main heroine, with tears in her eyes, said she simply didn't know. She shouted at the boy not to point his finger at her. She also remembered how the orphanage kids used to do the same and constantly taunted her about it. Suddenly, the girl looked up and saw the man who had accompanied her standing before her. She immediately wondered if this was that crybaby Mr. The paladin asked the boy why he had come here so suddenly, addressing him as His Highness. Hearing these words, the heroine was shocked and thought, could this boy really be a prince? Right after that, she looked at him and realized she remembered. She had definitely read in the novel that there was a young prince born with a different eye color, so it turned out that he was the one standing before her now. It also meant that this person was the fiancé of the main heroine from the second part of the novel she had ended up in. The boy turned to the great Duke Chynard and asked him to tell him something. He was very curious if there was any place in this country he couldn't go. The main heroine knew this boy's name was Simon Rohile Clemens. That meant he was the sole heir to the Clemens Empire and its crown prince. He was a clever boy with a perfectly trained body. Moreover, since he was born from the happy marriage of the Emperor and Empress, he received boundless love and attention. That's why his personality was nearly perfect. But even this boy had one complex. It was the symbol of belonging to the royal family. It turned out he was born without golden eyes. The girl looked at him and thought she now understood him perfectly. She also wondered if she had been surrounded by happiness all this time. Suddenly, the man approached the girl and asked if she had been badly frightened. The heroine thought that, come to think of it, the crown prince was the official fiancé of the main heroine, but he hated her and ran away from her. That only happened because the main heroine inherited golden eyes from the duke, which greatly irritated him. So now, looking at the boy, the girl understood why he harbored such anger toward her. Still, she thought she wouldn't forgive such ignorant treatment of herself. She immediately hugged the paladin tightly. His Highness addressed Alexius, saying he must be curious why he had come to him. The man pointed out that he knew why people came to the temple to pray to God. The boy immediately declared that he had forbidden outsiders from entering, and so, he had come here precisely because he found out about it. His interlocutor asked His Highness what he meant by that. The boy continued, saying he knew this man was keeping an eye on things. He added that after his death, it would be him who'd become the next heir. The man again asked what he was talking about. Simon added that he just didn't understand the point of his sudden return. On top of that, he had barred everyone from entering the temple. He asked if the man still claimed had misunderstood something. Alexis pointed out that he had clearly told his brother he had no claim to the throne. Now he didn't understand what was making him so angry. But the boy still didn't believe him and told him not to lie. The man replied that he was his godfather. He didn't understand how he could possibly take the place of his brother and nephew. His Highness didn't respond and turned away, avoiding an answer. By his expression, it was clear he felt a little ashamed. The main heroine, seeing this, grew a little angry and wondered why he was just staying silent. She also noted that she simply hated all of this. The man told the boy he wasn't sure if he'd heard, but it was time for him to return. The prince asked that if that was the case, what about the temple? The paladin immediately told him that this child needed treatment, which was why he had come to the temple. He also added that, despite what the boy might think, this girl wasn't his daughter, but the boy pointed out that it was impossible, they looked too much alike. The girl wondered if she and this man could really be related. The paladin asked His Highness not to make up unnecessary things. After all, this girl was just the daughter of his friend. The Holy One stood listening to the conversation and then said that's how it was. The main heroine grew sad, realizing that even this woman had thought she was his daughter. She also understood that she was utterly fed up with this interference in her personal life. After some brief reflection, the girl turned to her uncle and said she wanted to go home. The man apologized to her, saying she must have gotten overwhelmed. He added that Simon was just his nephew. He noted that he understood, as the girl looked quite tired. Then the man turned to His Highness, apologized, and said he wasn't in the best shape right now and would like to rest. The boy, with an arrogant tone, told him to go ahead. Hearing this, the man immediately thanked him and bowed before him. After that, he turned to the heroine and asked her to wait just a little longer. They'd be home soon. The heroine thought she was quite surprised. After all, she had thought this boy wouldn't let her go so easily. The girl looked at His Highness again and wondered if her appearance had angered him. After all, the boy standing before her seemed strange somehow. She immediately thought, why did he have such sad eyes? After all this, the boy returned to his palace. His mother greeted him right away and asked Simon where he'd been all this time. After all, he had a meeting with his future fiancé today. The boy didn't respond and immediately apologized to his mother. The woman thought he looked calmer than usual. She asked if something had happened, but he quickly said everything was fine. She immediately noted that if that was the case, then fine. She added that they couldn't keep their guests waiting any longer. Should listen to his story a little later. Right after that, she added that originally there was supposed to be a preliminary selection for the crown prince, but now he'd meet the guests without such events. Hearing this, the boy immediately started thinking. He wondered why the empire wasn't holding a selection and if it had to do with him. After all, he wasn't born with the eyes symbolizing the royal family, but did the crown prince's eyes really have to be golden? His mother continued, saying there had never been a case where descendants of the imperial family weren't royalty. She also expressed sadness over why he hadn't inherited her color. She sighed and said it was all her fault, full of regrets. Then she told the boy not to be upset and to be confident that the princess waiting for him had beautiful golden eyes. And that, she said, was simply the most wonderful news. The boy, hearing this, was surprised and grew even sadder, but he told her it was great. The woman added that, truthfully, she was a half-blood, but there was nothing to be done about it. She told Simon to just accept it. He replied that he would. But he was surprised, thinking it was strange. He didn't understand why he had to accept it or why he needed to make up for something he didn't have. Swirling thoughts wouldn't leave his head, and he wondered if nothing depended on him. Did he really just have to accept it? Though he thought there was no other way since he didn't have golden eyes. Right after all these reflections, they entered the room where the guests were already waiting. They apologized for the delay. Suddenly, the future fiancé stood up and told the crown prince she was pleased to meet him. Then, with a smile on her face, she introduced herself, saying her name was Yahello. She smiled sweetly and added that she was very happy about their meeting. The boy looked at her and said he was also very pleased, addressing her as Princess Yahello. He carefully looked at her eyes and thought that they were indeed golden. Standing across from his interlocutor, he wondered why, if they had the same color, the eyes of that girl he'd seen earlier in the day seemed so much more beautiful to him. He was thinking of the main heroine had met at the temple. That same evening, a carriage was returning to the trading guild's house. Inside it were the paladin and the main heroine, coming back from the temple. The heroine's mother greeted them upon their return. She said she'd heard on the street today that some generous buyer had appeared. Then the woman saw a huge pile of gifts being unloaded from the carriage. She said she was simply speechless after this. She asked if this man had really managed to buy a ton of gifts on the way back from the temple after the treatment. The man replied that, seeing how much Daphne liked things, it was hard for him to stop. That's why he'd bought so much. The main heroine thought that, although she'd definitely told him she didn't need so many gifts, at that moment when they were walking through the shops, the man had told them to give him all the toys they had. After the man bought all the toys, he asked the girl if she was happy about it. He also said he wanted Daphne's bad memories to disappear quickly and be replaced with happy ones. The main heroine gave him a sweet smile then and thought it was really very nice of him. At that moment, another woman approached them and asked the man about a gift for his daughter. The girl thought it felt as if Alexius had truly become her father. If she'd had a loving father, she'd probably feel something like this, she thought at that moment. After some brief reflection, her best friend approached Daphne. He smiled and asked if her trip had gone well. The girl smiled back and said, "It's rare." She added that she'd bought him something as a gift. The boy asked what kind of gift she'd gotten him. The main heroine immediately handed him a little box. She told him to open it, confident that he'd definitely like the gift. The boy was surprised and slowly began to open it. A few moments later, he opened the box and was shocked. Inside, he saw chocolates of all different shapes and flavors. He was overjoyed about it. The main heroine realized Ragnar was incredibly happy to receive the chocolate from her at that moment. Her family, hearing the news that her legs could be healed, sighed with confident relief. Some time later, the main heroine and her best friend were walking in the forest. Her uncle was with them too. Ragnar turned to him and asked him to tell them that story today. The man fulfilled his request and began the tale. The heroine knew Uncle Alexis sometimes visited them, and they'd have fun together. The girl thought it was great to have fun chatting, of course, but as she looked at her legs, she thought it would be even better if she could run around with Ragnar. The man also paused and asked where he'd left off in the story. The girl pointed out that the journey to their borders, where he had to pass power to his older brother, had ended. Now it was time to tell what happened after his arrival. Recalling the novel's plot, the girl knew this story hadn't been included in the original work, so it was entirely new to her. Because of this, the heroine had been completely focused lately. The uncle said that was fine and continued. He began by saying that a gusty wind tore through the torrential rain brought by a hurricane. It was then that he finally reached the border. Right after arriving, they discovered such a massive dungeon that even he was momentarily terrified. Hearing this, the main hero asked what kind of dungeon it was. The girl immediately wondered if Ragnar didn't know what dungeons were, though she thought she'd only read about them in the original plot herself. The man explained that a dungeon was a terrifying place that appeared unpredictably, draining all the surrounding lands. The monsters inside attacked people. He added that sometimes the dungeon dug its own traps and dragged people into it. The boy asked his uncle if he wasn't scared in such a frightening place. After all, even he would have wanted to run away from there. His interlocutor replied that if you conquered the dungeon, it would disappear immediately, and many people would even become happy. With a smile, he added that the boy should know the title of a temple knight meant bearing the duty of an imperial family member and protecting the empire's people. He spoke these words with immense pride. The main heroine immediately thought that if someone as warm as her uncle had become emperor and learned of her birth mother's situation, would her death have been so tragic? She was very curious about that. The girl continued reflecting, wondering where her mother's body had been buried after that. She thought it would be wonderful if it were a warm forest glade. She knew she'd probably never see her mother again, alive or dead. So if rumors spread out of her greed that the Benedetta trading group was tied to a Villainess, it would cause her current mother great harm. After that, the heroine clenched her fist and thought that someday she wanted to see her mother. After all these events, time flew by quickly. Some time later, summer arrived. The main heroine was back at the temple. The Holy One told Daphne that she had fought her illness diligently and had noticeably improved during this time. Right after that, she asked if the girl would try standing while holding her hand. The main heroine immediately agreed. The paladin told the girl not to overexert herself if it hurt, but she assured him she'd be fine. She thought she just needed to tense her legs and stand up, and a moment later, the girl stood on her feet, though they still trembled a little. Seeing this, the man, as usual, started crying and said Daphne was finally standing. The woman noted that he always cried when the girl stood up. She also said it was starting to come too easily to her. Right after that, the woman asked if the girl would try walking a little. The girl replied that, of course, she'd try. She took a few steps, but suddenly her leg gave out. She stopped immediately and looked at it. Seeing this, the man told Daphne she didn't need to overdo it, as there was still plenty of time. But the girl confidently said there was no need for that, she could do it all. Right after that, holding on to hands, she continued moving forward. She thought she needed to do it calmly and try again. With very small movements, she kept pushing forward, stepping with her legs. Meanwhile, the woman and the man watched closely what the girl was doing, intensely worried about her and her health. The main heroine still felt discomfort in her legs and thought, if only they'd move even a little. She was practically begging them. A few moments later, her legs finally obeyed her and began to move little by little. The girl felt and saw this and was quite overjoyed by the event. The uncle accompanying her was perhaps even happier than the girl herself that she was walking. As soon as he saw it, he thanked God for everything. Then he immediately started crying and hugged the girl as if he were her father. Some time after visiting the temple, the main heroine and her uncle were walking through the city. But suddenly, the weather turned bad, and a heavy downpour began. Seeing this, the man said it was very unfortunate. After all, it was pouring outside. They'd bought a cake to celebrate the good news, but now it would be dangerous and difficult to get home. The girl immediately asked if they really couldn't go home. The adult replied that she'd have to sleep in the carriage or on the street then. After all, there was no one nearby to help her. Suddenly, the man shouted that this couldn't happen. How could he let their precious stuff and sleep on the street? A little later, he came closer to the girl. He asked her if they should head to the capital estate of the Archduke. The girl wondered what this capital estate of the Archduke was. She immediately asked the man if they needed to go to her uncle's house. He smiled and said that was exactly it. While the heroine chatted pleasantly with him, someone nearby was watching them, hiding under a hood. After a short while, they set off for the man's estate. When the main heroine entered the house, she saw a very luxurious interior. Everything sparkled and looked incredibly expensive. A whole crowd of maids lined up at the main entrance, greeting His Highness, the Archduke. The heroine watched all this and thought what a simply enormous estate it was. At that moment, the man began giving orders to his subordinate butler. He said they should first fill a bath so Daphne wouldn't catch a cold and prepare comfortable home clothes for her. The subordinate immediately replied that they'd do it right away. Then the uncle said that everyone except the butler and the head maid could be dismissed. They all replied that they'd obey at once. The girl, hearing all this, wondered if her crybaby uncle really had this side to him that she was seeing now. Suddenly, the head maid, an elderly woman, approached the girl. She asked the young lady if they'd go to the bath now. The girl smiled sweetly and said, "Of course, yes." The woman smiled warmly at the main heroine and said she'd seen so much in her long life, but this was something new. Meanwhile, the rain outside poured harder and harder. The maid dressed the girl in home clothes and said that when her master mentioned he'd found a delightful child who was like a daughter to him, she couldn't quite understand what he meant. But now, seeing the girl, it was all perfectly clear. After that, she stood up and said she'd bring some warm tea before dinner. She asked if the girl had any special preferences. The main heroine smiled and said any tea would do. The maid left, saying she'd be back soon. Then the main heroine was left alone in the room. There was absolute silence, and the girl could fully enjoy it. She began examining her clothes and thought it seemed her uncle had prepared them for her in advance. After all, they fit so perfectly, as if they'd been sewn just for her. Suddenly, she recalled the woman's words about her master saying he'd found a child who was like a daughter to him. Indeed, he truly treated the main heroine like his own daughter. She remembered a recent moment when he'd even wiped her feet himself after washing them at the temple. Then the girl thought that, though it was impossible, it would be wonderful if this man turned out to be her real father. Suddenly, someone knocked on her room's door. The girl wondered in surprise if it was the old maid, but then she thought she'd only just left. Could she really be back so soon? A moment later, the door swung open, and the girl was shocked by what she saw. Standing before her was the very boy she'd seen recently at the temple of the Crown Prince, Simon. The girl immediately grew scared and wondered why he was here. She realized she didn't like this and felt a little frightened. She immediately asked if he might start threatening her again, but the boy just stood there for a while, looking at her. After a short time, he began approaching the girl and told her to listen to what he had to say. Then he turned his head away, as if embarrassed, and apologized to her. The girl, hearing this, was shocked. He added that he'd been too worked up back then and started shouting. He said he hadn't meant to scare her, but it seemed he had. He promised to be more careful from now on. Right after he said all this, a heavy silence fell over the room. He'd said everything, but the heroine couldn't respond, too stunned by his words. The boy immediately blushed and got a little angry. He told her to at least say something in response. The girl snapped out of it and apologized for that. She added that she was just embarrassed because she hadn't expected to hear such words from him. The main heroine also thought that, honestly, she hadn't even imagined she'd get an apology from him. However, seeing how the willful crown prince had cooled off, she was starting to warm up to him little by little. The heroine smiled and said she understood and thanked him for apologizing to her. After she said this, the boy's expression instantly changed from gloomy to a smile. The girl was shocked to see this. Meanwhile, the boy turned away and thought what a relief it was that she'd accepted his apology. He immediately wondered why he suddenly felt so calm when she did. The main heroine addressed him again and asked if he'd really come here just to apologize to her. The boy said that if she was asking about that, he was here to avoid the rain. The girl asked where he'd come from then. He replied that, of course, it was from the temple. The girl was surprised and asked if he'd followed them. The crown prince sat down next to the girl on the sofa. He said he'd just wanted to talk to them but couldn't join their conversation. He added that he just needed to ask her something. He asked the girl if she perhaps didn't like golden eyes. She thought to herself that her interlocutor was quite perceptive. She told him that was exactly it, she didn't like them. Purple eyes were more to her taste. The boy asked why that was, since golden eyes symbolized the imperial family and testified to noble blood. The main heroine asked why that should matter to her. After all, she wasn't a member of the imperial family. She also added that, on top of that, golden eyes belonged to someone she simply hated. That's exactly why she didn't like them. The crown prince said he understood. Then he added that it was the opposite for him. Golden eyes belonged to everyone he loved. The heroine immediately thought, what was he saying? Did it seem like he wanted to pour his heart out to her? She thought she couldn't escape her own nightmares, yet here she was, able to listen to someone else's problems. She immediately apologized to His Highness and said she was a little tired. But suddenly, the girl heard the boy sobbing and immediately turned her attention to it. He was indeed crying bitterly, asking why he was the only one who hadn't inherited golden eyes. Tears streamed down his face in torrents, and he said he was very jealous of the girl. Hearing this, the heroine didn't respond and thought there was nothing she could do about it. Then she turned to the crying boy sitting beside her and asked if he wanted her to listen to him. She added that her mum had told her if you bottled up negative emotions, you could get sick. She also thought that she hadn't even gotten rid of her own nightmares and wasn't sure she could help him, but she couldn't just leave him like this. The crown prince turned to her and looked at her closely. The girl continued, saying that if he got sick, he'd feel pain, and it was better if she listened to him. She also thought she couldn't just ignore his situation. A short while later, the boy began pouring out his heart to her. He said that for generations, members of the imperial family had inherited golden eyes. It turned out his father, grandfather, and even his uncle, the Archduke, had them. And so, he was the only one in the imperial family without golden eyes. Everyone said it wasn't a big deal, but in reality, they didn't doubt his lineage. The boy grew sad again as he told this story. He went on, saying that behind his back, everyone kept saying golden eyes were the symbol of the imperial family and had to be inherited. The crown prince understood they were deliberately pointing it out in his presence. He kept crying and asked why he didn't have golden eyes, just couldn't understand it. He also wondered if he was to blame for being born this way and if he'd somehow been born wrong. The main heroine listened closely to her companion's story. She thought it couldn't be true. After all, we don't choose how we're born, and it's unfair to mock someone just for how they came into the world. A moment later, the girl said that there was no one in this world who was born wrong. She asked if he really had to have golden eyes. Just because he didn't have them, did that make him any less of a crown prince? She also asked if his parents hadn't recognized him as their child. The boy said that wasn't true, they both loved him dearly. The girl pointed out that, in that case, his parents had recognized him, and the lack of golden eyes hadn't affected his status as crown prince. So what was his problem now? She noted that he was still the crown prince, and nothing would change that, so he shouldn't listen to what other people said. After that, she added that he should always remember there was no fault of his own in this. The boy asked if there really wasn't any blame on him. The girl told him that, of course, that was true. He wouldn't be at fault even if his parents hadn't recognized him or if his status as crown prince had been shaken. At that moment, she thought she'd just said what she herself wanted to hear. She immediately thought of her own mother and wished someone would tell her they weren't to blame, that no one in this world was born wrong. Suddenly, the crown prince stood up and asked the girl if she really didn't care that he didn't have golden eyes. She immediately said it didn't matter to her at all. He asked if that was seriously true and if she'd swear it by God. The girl exclaimed how much more he needed to ask. The boy added that he'd just always wanted to hear those words, that it was okay even if he didn't have golden eyes. Tears kept streaming from his eyes as he spoke. Meanwhile, the weather outside remained restless, with heavy rain still pouring down. A short while later, the boy finally calmed down. He remarked what he was doing, after all, had been comforted by a girl younger than him. His eyes were completely swollen from crying for so long. The boy sat next to the main heroine, looking off in a completely different direction. He also said he wanted to thank her first of all for all those words. The heroine asked where he was looking at that moment. She wondered if he couldn't see anything in front of him. Then he turned and slightly opened his eyes. He said he wanted to apologize again for scaring her back then and introduce himself formally. He said his name was Simon Royalty Clemens, and he was the crown prince of this empire. The main heroine smiled in response and said her name was Daphne Benedetto. That meant she was the heiress of the Benedetto trading group. She was the daughter of the trading group's head, not the Archduke's daughter, as everyone thought. The boy said he understood. After that, he wandered around the room for a long time, deep in thought. He wanted to say something. The girl noticed this and told him that if he wanted to say something to her, he should just say it. Suddenly, the boy blushed a little and told Daphne he wanted to offer her the chance to be his first friend. The girl heard this, was surprised, and wondered if he was asking to be her friend. The main heroine immediately apologized and said that wouldn't work. Her first friend was Rara. The boy asked who this Rara was. How could someone like that be friends with the renowned heiress of the trading group? The girl said that while the position of second friend was open, she asked how that sounded to him. The boy said it was fine, and he'd be her second friend then. While they were discussing this, the uncle walked into the room. He asked the girl if she'd been waiting long for him. When the man entered, he was shocked and asked if Simon was really there. The boy noticed him, waved, and said to the Archduke that it had been ages since they'd last seen each other. The man asked when he'd arrived. He added that if he'd come, he should have come to him first. Suddenly, the head maid walked in and apologized, saying she couldn't stop him. The boy said he'd just come to see Daphne. The crown prince noted that he'd apologized for last time, and now they'd decided to become friends. The man nearly fainted hearing this. He asked if he'd really apologized and wanted to be friends with him. He immediately thought something was off and asked how he'd lured Daphne. Simon asked if he really thought he was like him. After all, he'd just offered her friendship and nothing more. After that, the man approached the girl and said that wasn't the important thing right now. He added that they'd talk later, but first, he needed to discuss something with the girl. The heroine asked if it was really with her. The man said she'd understood correctly. Because of the heavy rain, Chloe had asked him to look after her for one night. He added that he had something else. Then he pulled out a little box, opened it, and showed her a hairpin inside. The main heroine thought it was the very thing she'd seen at the market earlier that day. She immediately asked how he knew she'd been looking at that butterfly hairpin. The man said it was a gift to celebrate her visiting him. He asked if she liked it. The girl took it in her hands and smiled sweetly. She said, of course, she liked it, and she was thrilled with the gift. Seeing her, both boys got quite embarrassed, and the crown prince thought the girl was very beautiful. The Archduke said it felt like the first time he'd seen her smile right in front of him. The boy asked his uncle if he was really crying. The heroine thought he'd just been crying himself. Why was he asking that? And so, that day, the main heroine received a gift from her uncle and ate delicious food. She spent a happy, warm day then. The man tucked the girl in and was about to leave her. He mentally wished her good night. As he was leaving the girl's room, the butler approached him. Bowing, he told the man that butler Agatha had escorted His Highness, the Crown Prince, and returned. The Archduke said he'd done well and could now go rest, but the butler replied that he had a report. He said he'd found out which nobles had been saying unnecessary things to His Highness, the Crown Prince. The master immediately turned to him and demanded he tell him right now. The butler said he thought it might not just be the nobles. He added that Duke Heronis was acting particularly suspiciously. The Archduke asked his subordinate if he was saying Duke Heronis was the one who'd told Simon these things. He thought to himself that this was bad. After all, he didn't want Simon to get dragged into adult affairs. He understood that this child already bore a heavy burden. After all, he'd had a complex about his eyes since childhood, so it wasn't surprising that lately he'd become even more sensitive to it all. Then he suddenly shouted that their thirst for power had completely gone to their heads. It was disgusting that they'd drag a child into this and mock him at the same time. The butler addressed his master and asked what if they gave the Duke a small warning. The man replied that he'd wanted to, but if he revealed himself right after returning to the capital, the pressure would only increase. In anger, he struck the window and thought he couldn't just sit idly by. Right after that, he began pondering what to do next. Some time later, after all this, the weather outside was simply beautiful and sunny. The main heroine stepped outside with the head made for a little walk. The girl basked in the sunlight and said the weather that day was simply wonderful. Suddenly, the maid addressed the heroine and told the young lady to take this box. She added that the chef had specially baked these cookies just for the girl. She took it in her hands and thanked her right away. The woman also added that the girl was incredibly beautiful. The butterfly hairpin the Archduke had given her suited her perfectly. The girl blushed a little at the kind words and thanked the woman. At that moment, they were sitting in a carriage, about to head somewhere with the Archduke. The butler stood with the maid, and the woman said there was no need to thank them. She asked the girl to visit them again. Right after they said goodbye, the carriage set off for its destination. They were heading to the main heroine's mother. Finally, they arrived at the estate. The girl's birth mother greeted her and hugged her tightly. She immediately asked her child if everything had gone well.